Propose to kick off immediately. My name is Nick Tess. I'm a senior advisor at the OECD Sigma program. And today, as said, we have a nice and well-filled agenda. Just allow me to briefly share my screen to talk you through. Just this. So today's session dedicated to really a fascinating topic on AI, artificial intelligence, and the context of service delivery in the Western Balkans. This webinar, as some of you might notice, this is part of a series of webinars that we started to organize since some time now. We had a first one on behavioral insights a couple of weeks ago, already a month ago, and now we have the second topic, which is dealing with AI. All of you have received the agenda, and without any further ado, I would dive into the agenda because our first speakers are quite short in time, but really grateful that we have them. So first speaker, and joining me in the opening, Florian Hauser, team lead in the public administration reform area in DG NEAR. So great to have you again with us, Florian. So before passing to the minister, I would kindly ask you to join me in welcoming the audience today. Please, Florian.
Yes. Thank you very much, Nick. You can hear me well?
Loud and clear.
So good morning, Minister. Good morning, dear colleagues. So thanks so much for putting this on. It's so timely. I think it is so amazing. And to be honest, I will keep it with a quote by Warren Buffett, you know, one of the most successful investors of all times. And he said last week, artificial intelligence, I don't understand it, but it will rock the boat. You know, I think we all, and I think at least I hope some of you will be with me on this, that I really don't understand it, but I think it's absolutely amazing. And we have to adjust to it. And, you know, in the European Commission, we are also an administration, and we're also getting to grips with it. So last week I got a formal notice, and the Commission decided to give us some guidance and rules how to deal with it. And just to let you know, there were 5 rules that we are asked to follow when engaging with artificial intelligence. Well, and especially focusing on generative artificial intelligence tools. So the first is, you know, never share information that is not already in the public domain. So you have to really be careful when you use it and you make queries that you actually give away confidential information. The second is you really need to check when you get a result. It might sound really cool, but there might be a lot of biases or inaccuracies. Then you need, the third one is, you know, always be mindful of, you might actually violate intellectual property rights or copyrights. So be mindful of this. And then it says, don't just ask ChatGPT or something else, and then just put it directly into an EC document. You know, it has to have your own sort of verification and adaptation to it. So, and last but not least, you know, don't rely on it, especially not for critical or time-sensitive processes. So I think that's, I'm sure there will be plenty more to come, but I think that's a good starting point that EU civil servants will have to follow. At the same time, in the guidance, they also tell us, you know, there's now, I mean, we all know ChatGPT, but, you know, there is DALL-E, Midjourney, Bard AI, LAMD, Aleph Alpha, Bloom, Stable Diffusion. I mean, there will be more and more. And probably the way when we started with the internet, we had so much, and then there was a filter, and the best ones will succeed. But I think we all agree it will really change our world, hopefully for the better. But some people also say it will be the end of the world. But in the context of this seminar, I think there will be great uses to help administration to function better, to ease our work, and also to provide better services. So I'm curious to learn what the experts will tell us about it. Enjoy the seminar. Thanks so much for putting this up.
And thank you so much for being with us, Florian, and opening this this webinar this time, but also all previous times. It's really great always to count on you. As said already by Florian, I mean, this is really a fascinating topic, and I think we also have put fascinating speakers on the agenda today. Before diving into I would say the technical experts and content, we are really grateful that we have today with us Minister Mihailo Jovanovic, Minister of Information and Telecommunications in Serbia. And as we all know, I mean, Serbia has and is like a front runner also in this area in the Western Balkans, but even wider. So really, really grateful, Mihailo, to have you here as one of the also the authors of the AI strategy in your country. So with any further ado, please, Minister, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Nick, dear colleagues, dear friends, valued participants of the Sigma webinar. It's my honor to greet you in front of the Ministry of Information Telecommunications and the government of the Republic of Serbia, and express my great pleasure that the Republic of Serbia, with today's presence, has been recognized as a participant in a new scientific and technological chapter in the field of artificial intelligence. Since 2017, in just 6 years, the Republic of Serbia, led by the vision of the Prime Minister, Ana Brnabić, who saw Serbia as a country of science, digitalization, creativity, and innovation, has positioned itself as a regional leader in the ICT field. In just few years, 5-6 years, we have transformed Serbia, giving an opportunity to our engineers, innovative and creative people. We quickly invested in infrastructure, reforms, and creating a business environment in order to take advantage of the development opportunity to position ourselves as a state of favorable opportunities in the age of digitalization and become one of the leaders of the fourth industrial revolution. First of all, I would like to explain the results of our ICT sector that has become one of the most promising sectors, a generator of new jobs. Each following year is a record year for us. In 2022, the export of ICT services reached a record of 2.7 billion euros. And today, the export of ICT services for the first quarter 2023 is about 786 million euros, which represents a growth of 44% compared to the same period last year. In 2017, digitalization and education became two key priorities of the government, and we managed to transform public administration into a modern, efficient, transparent, and user-oriented services that enable citizens and business to complete administrative tasks faster and more efficiently from one place on the globe and at the time that suits them best. Thanks to the National Portal of Electronic Identification today, we have almost 2 million registered e-citizens who use hundreds of different electronic services, accessing to the e-government portal and many other state portals. Thanks to these results, according to the latest edition of the Global Report of the United Nations, which monitors the development of e-government, Serbia is among 10 countries in the world that have made the most progress in this area, while the World Bank ranks us in the high 4th place in Europe in the field of digital transformation. We have also spread broadband telecommunication infrastructure throughout Serbia, reaching the most remote villages and households. We have connected all schools to the internet, to the broadband internet, introduced digital teaching content, introduced programming in elementary schools, specialized IT department in secondary schools, and specialized master's program at the faculties. Serbia has made significant efforts and investments in the development of startups and innovation infrastructure. Today, our startups and scientists have at their disposal innovative infrastructure for science and technology parks in 4 cities in Serbia: in Belgrade, Novi Sad, Čačak, and Niš, and soon in 2 more cities, in Kragujevac and Kruševac. We have also state-of-the-art supercomputer, NVIDIA supercomputer, in our government data center in Kragujevac. And we have exceeded the current capacities. In the coming period, we are working on expanding the capacities in Kragujevac by building the first innovation district. And the last, we are planning the National Center for Cybersecurity also in Kragujevac. Now the time has come to talk about the following technological revolution, which is the revolution that is happening with the development of artificial intelligence, which we can also see as the 5th industrial revolution. On that note, back in 2019, we adopted the strategy for the development of artificial intelligence in the Republic of Serbia for the period 2025, making us the first country in Southeast Europe and the only 26th country in the world to have such a strategy. In March 21, we founded the Institute for the Artificial Intelligence. Last year, the Republic of Serbia became a member of Euro HPC, which was founded by the EU and deals with the development of supercomputers in Europe. Last year, Serbia was elected as a member of the Global Partnership for the Artificial Intelligence. Serbia is also one of the 11 countries in the world that has artificial intelligence programs implemented in elementary and secondary education. We have also 5 master's programs in AI, and in this year we will have 7 of them. Also, national funds for science and innovation support numerous projects, companies, and startups dealing with artificial intelligence. At the Global Summit in Dubai, the government of Serbia was recognized as one of the most innovative governments in the world, and our initiative to enable startups to work on the national platform for artificial intelligence through a public call was singled out as one of the 9 most innovative in the competition out of 1,000 initiatives from around the world. One of the projects carried out of the platform, of the national platform for AI, is the world's largest project in the field of astronomy, in which a team of Serbian scientists participates. Through the activities of this team and their work of the national platform, Serbia will have full access to the exclusive data that the telescope installed in Chile will provide during the 10-year project operation. And at the end, the government of the Republic of Serbia believes that Serbia is ready to lead the entire region in the changes that are coming and create new opportunities for everyone. That is why, in the coming years, we remain a reliable partner for cooperation, offering the most modern technological solutions and excellent engineering staff, creating a state based on knowledge and innovation. Thank you very much for listening to me and giving me the opportunity to participate in this event.
Thank you so much indeed, dear Minister, dear Mihailo, for being with us, being present, and I think opening this this webinar in such a thrilling way. I think it's really a demonstration of how, starting from a vision, as you said, back in 2017 already, this vision has brought the country to some amazing results in this area, in this field, really tapping into the wider ecosystem. I mean, bringing and the industry, public administration, but also spilling over to the fields of education, bringing this all together. And this is really, really fascinating to see. And congratulations with, well, pulling this vision together, but also in really implementing all of this in such a good way. As said, it's really, I think, for all of us and for the countries in the region, but even far beyond the region, really a very nice example how this can work. I think your good example will be complemented later on by our good friend Sim Sikut, the former CIO of Estonia. We're also there. They, for quite some years, have invested in this development and also developed an AI strategy. So Sim will discuss much more and present much more later on. We know you have to run, Minister, to another engagement. Otherwise, it would be really a pleasure to discuss further with you and to have you longer with us. But we know how busy your schedule is. So many thanks again for being with us, and we stay in touch. Thank you so much once more. Thanks again. With this, and after this, I think excellent scene setting of stressing the and importance, but also the visionary element, I think it's a good moment to switch to the next speaker and diving even more into the content, and therefore really happy that I think we have one of the leading people, the leading experts these days in AI in government with us. So happy, Colin, that you join us in this webinar. We will have the pleasure of having Colin at two moments during this webinar. First, now introducing us into, I would say, a bit more the concepts, the potential, what AI is and can do in public administration, and then afterwards also giving more concrete examples on what it is, what it can do, and maybe in the future even is able to do. As said, Colin is really like a leading expert in this area. He has been working and is still working closely with the European Commission, as advising the Commission on many areas and many topics related to AI. He also has done his PhD in this area. He's also one of the authors of the European Commission AI Watch handbook. And so now, these days, he's also acting as a program director on AI in the digital nation, Estonian digital nation. So I think with this, again, just an illustration of the leading role Colin is playing. So please, Colin, the screen is yours. You should be able to share your presentation as a co-host. Please, Colin.
All right, then I hope it works well.
Yes.
Are we all set? All right, thank you very much.
Set. Thanks, Colin.
And very pleased to be here. So yeah, I won't have to repeat you and introducing myself, but yes, I've been working on the topic of AI in government for a while now in under various hats and different roles. So I'm almost done with my PhD on this topic. I'm working at the Digital Nation as program director. I was an external expert to the AI Watch research team, and there's indeed a couple publications that I will also go through and very quickly, actually, throughout this morning. I'm also working on In Touch AI project, which is more diplomacy. And also I'm co-editor of the research handbook that is not yet released, but soon to be published. So a lot of different elements that are all related to AI within government organizations. Because there is a lot of interest in this technology, and I guess that's also the same reason why we are here today with such many numbers. The big interest in AI, with all the headlines that, well, usually every few weeks or months we have a new headline on AI that is going to change the world and change the government. But this hype has been around for a while, right? So on the right side, you can see 8 years ago that Google was already announcing that we have human-like intelligence coming closer, predictions that we will talk more with chatbots than our spouses by 2020 by Gartner. Also how self-driving cars will be around in 2019. So there's a lot of hype and a lot of interest in how this technology is going to change society. But we also need to know the facts from the potential, right? So, and that's a bit what I have been trying to understand, especially with the roles that government play. And they are 3 roles usually that government organizations play in this bigger narrative. This is on the one hand a facilitator, such as stimulating their businesses, becoming the leading tech companies, making it more comfortable for businesses to develop and apply AI, opening data, giving grants, building up the right infrastructure so people can either develop or use AI in their country. But we also see governments having to balance this with a regulatory role, right? So we also need to put the framework conditions, the ethical guidelines, legal guidance, making sure that the harms that AI can bring are mitigated as much as possible. And we often see that we kind of focus only on those 2 different roles, right? And they are very important, don't get me wrong. But there's the third role, the user role, where public administrations themselves are the ones using AI technologies, either to support the other roles, right? But also for the many other tasks that they have and require people and resources to do so effectively. And this has been very, well, almost a bit overlooked in the past. Now we are seeing more and more potential, but that's exactly where I think is still the most gains to be made, and also a lot of uncharted territory, because we still know very little on AI, right? So this is on the left, you see the amount of AI-related publications from the AI Index. This is a quite widely cited report that tracks all AI research and fundings, and they highlighted that there's now 5 million AI publications, well, from 2010 up to now. That is really significant. But I did a quick search as well in a digital government related academic library, and you can see there's almost nothing of those 5 million, because we don't really look into this topic that much, what is highly technical and not related to the daily practice that, well, you and I are probably more familiar with. So this is still very uncharted territory. We're still in an early phase, but it's growing. It's growing quite significantly. So that's good to see, but we're still on an early phase when it comes to the use of AI in government organizations. But then, of course, we have to ask ourselves, what is this AI, right? So just to have a very brief introduction to what we are discussing about, we often have, on the one hand, a group that usually links AI with the more futuristic technologies, right? So, and this comes already from 1965 about ultra intelligent machines, the super intelligence, the bit of the aim of a super robot that is human-like or even more than human-like is often at the realm and of the discussions. And it is a bit also of a fearful scenario, right? So you have these utopian messages about the super intelligence that is helping our society. And on the one hand, we have the doom scenarios, the Terminator talks, and also even now, often the warnings about the creation of such machines. And I think it's very interesting to talk about, but very often has nothing to do with the actual AI that we're talking about now, and that is more relevant now with their own issues, with their own potential benefits, right? So these are some applications that are now in place that we often regard as AI. These are not the futuristic robots. No, this is right now, right? The AlphaGo in 2019 beating the champion. ChatGPT, large language skills models now up and running, surgical systems that can do this automatically, precision farming, self-driving cars, right? These are the AI of now. And I think that is a crucial differentiation to have, right? So are we talking about a futuristic AI or are we talking about the applications now, which are more tangible and that we can assess on their benefits and the risks? Then, of course, we have to go a bit deeper under the hood, right? So why is this so booming now? And that has often to do with the fact that most of these applications and the recent gains on AI has been driven by the rise and the more applicability of machine learning, right? So this is a graph also from the JRC already, an older report. But one of the key changes is that with most traditional programming, you write yourself the rules, and when data comes in, you give the answer. But with machine learning, it's a bit the opposite, right? You feed it enough data, enough of the answers, and it finds the patterns themselves. It creates the rules themselves, which comes with, of course, opportunities for learning, but also difficulties that we will also probably discuss later on in terms of transparency and accountability. And there's a lot of different ways, right? So this is a graph from the World Bank, a lot of different machine learning algorithms, and we don't really need to know this as well. We don't need to go in depth in each of them, but this is the bit of the technical realm, right? So what goes behind the machines? And I think the three main ways that most of the AI systems are based on. So this is either the supervised learning approach, which basically means you have a set of data, which is either, it's classified already, right? So you have either apples or bananas. The machine learning algorithm is capable of distinguishing the labels and the pictures. After enough data, it is able to see new data sets and I predict this with meaningful accuracy, right? So that's the main point. But as you can see, you know already what are all the apples, you know all the bananas, and then after a while it knows how to distinguish. And of course, you do this with a lot more variables. Unsupervised approaches are a bit more unstructured, right? So you let the machine create categories. So rather than you classifying already the types of fruits, you let it find out clusters by itself that, of course, by themselves might not mean much. You still need to understand what is the cluster that is made, but it tries to find certain patterns within the data that is, for us, usually undistinguishable, and just connect and group them. And the last main learning approach that goes under the hood of most of these AI applications, it's either one of those three or combination thereof, is the more reinforcement. It's a bit more, how would you say, childlike, as in it doesn't act, you give feedback, and then it learns by doing. And for instance, this is done in a lot of these computer games where they learn how to play a game. And this is not with 3 tries, right? So they let a computer play 3-5 million times, and then at one point it figures out how to play. But I think what is also important is that these technical perspectives, it's important to understand, but it's even more crucial to understand also the humans behind AI, and also the difficulty in determining what and when it is not fully AI, right? So we often have these applications that are released on the market with a lot of interest and a lot of capabilities to do intelligent tasks, right? That's a bit of the key word there. So the computer is capable of doing something that we didn't think computers could do before. But we often forget a bit the humans behind it, right? Up to the fraudulent point. So this is even an image from the 18th century, the Mechanical Turk. That was an automated chess machine that was being shown as a new feat of engineering, because it could do chess by itself and beat people. But what was not shown is that there was actually a person hiding underneath this machine who was actually playing the chess, right? So it was a fraud. There was actually no machine playing. It was the people. And we have a bit of the same with AI now, right? It's not always fully human, to the fact that it is either completely fraudulent, right? So in this case, There was even reports of a chatbot that was being sold as chatbot, but actually there were lowly paid people behind the scenes doing all the work. Or it is actually quite difficult to establish when or what is AI due to the different confusions and the perspectives. So some may say this is AI, and others think, well, this is just some statistics, right? With derogatory, but this makes it blurry. The field is blurry to really pinpoint when or what kind of AI is behind the scenes. But nevertheless, even with this diverse set of different type of applications, what we have seen, and I've seen it a lot with the research, are different ways AI is now being deployed or could be deployed to attack and support different functions of government, right? So we have a lot of developments in the use of AI for policy making purposes. So that means either detecting issues faster because you have more data to analyze it, or you can use social media analysis to identify what are the main issues in a city, for instance. So in Dublin, they used such a system to analyze the tweets, and then it could automatically generate what are the topics that people on Twitter talk about. You also see AI that's being used to estimate certain policy options, right? To have a better ex-ante impact assessment. Whether it's 100% correct, probably not, but it at least helps to distinguish different choices a bit better. You can also see it to improve the decision-making processes and steps, monitor the implementation of policy that we also highlight later. Or for instance, with the use of satellite data, so you can monitor if the policy is being done correctly, or the use of computer vision, so to detect the wearing of seat belts, so police can see easier whether people adhere to the rules. You also see the use of AI now in bringing more opportunities for citizens to be part of the policy making process, and thus in essence making the policy more relevant, more data driven, more based on empirical data rather than hunches of policymaker or political decisions. So as a way, better policy is better effectiveness and better social well-being. Of course, that's the main driver behind the use thereof. What we also see is the use of AI in different public services. So this usually comes in the form of enhancing the information about government services to citizens, very often in chatbots or in better website functionality. The key word there is often personalization, right? So making the public service more personal to the citizens, more accommodating to their own needs, maybe even proactively, right? So rather than having someone come to you, you can already calculate and have a reasonable guess that someone might need other services too, and already propose it to them, or even just give it straight on if the data allows you to do so. Of course, there's a lot of potential in using AI technologies to automate redundant processes for either the civil service or for the citizens, reducing the need to go to offices. Here, especially in Estonia, they're very keen on not going to public administration's offices. So everything online is highly preferred. We also see that we have small trials like the one here in Barcelona, Misty, that is trying to create whole kinds of new public services, right? So the use of care robots for elderly people as the part of their public services, that is of course not possible without these breakthroughs in robotics. We also see different ways of using AI to reduce corruption, improve the trust in public service delivery, because it can make the optimization more widespread and thus leave little room for corrupt public officials, or even predict where it is likely to occur, or empower these staff members, right, with decision support tools that help them to analyze in ways that were not even possible before, and provide them the best service to whoever is asking for some aid. And then third area is, I mean, there's many more, of course, but just these three areas are often what I see is for more internal, right? So it's not for the citizens, it's mostly for the internal focus of the administration. And these range in also a wide variety of different tasks. These may mean to have AI to improve the recruitment services of the administration. In the sense, better recruitment services, better staff members often leads also to better performance, better understanding what are the needs, the career paths, or in this case, the use of AI within the interview process to help out which are the main competent candidates for the tasks. We also see the use of AI to have a more efficient allocation of human resources, as in when and who to use for inspection, or who should be available, where to use the staff in the best way possible, rather than completely random or based on hunches. You see it also used in financial management, cybersecurity purposes, the predictive maintenance task, as in to understand when you need to put maintenance for a certain object. You also see AI being used within public procurement processes to also analyze which offers are likely to be fraudulent or likely to go over cost, or when the offer is very low compared or very high compared to other offers that has been made. And of course, the detection of fraud is a quite common use of AI. In this case, for instance, in Veripol, where they tried to use AI to detect false police reports, but you see many of those examples. But what I would like to highlight is that all these potential applications, often based on the technological progress and the potential applications, the practice has not caught up necessarily that much. There is a huge gap between the potential of AI technologies and the actual use thereof by public administrations, right? So where the previous slide, we had a lot of hype about what AI was supposed to change. More recent headlines, they show a very different picture. They talk about when AI will actually take off, the not transformation of healthcare, the main challenges to AI adoption in government, and even China, what would arguably be one of the bad examples of the social credit system, is actually facing issues in implementing this technology because of various challenges, right? Or AI that has been used by government administrations were actually illegal and has thus been overturned by courts. And you might think, well, this is because we don't necessarily have such a big technological environment or ecosystem. But even in the US, there was a report highlighting that policy actions are not sufficiently focused to addressing structural issues of adoption of AI in government of the USA. So even when you have the technological companies nearby, it doesn't mean that AI application in administrations is necessarily that straightforward. Because AI in government is a form of digital government transformation, you cannot expect the technology community to drive this transformation for you. This has to come from within the administration. And this is not just me, right? This was the UK National Audit Office a few months ago that also highlighted this, looking back into the achievements and the gaps between in the UK with regards to the digital transformation strategies and policies. And very often what you then see is that the technological community is expected to lead the administration into the future, but actually the ones that do so are you guys, the ones that might not have a technical background, but are the key decision makers in the organization. So what I've seen from all of the research that I've done, and also the case studies that I've seen, is despite that we're still in this early phase, we do see certain success factors popping up, and we will discuss also way more examples later on. But I think these are a couple of ones that I think are very crucial to make sure that AI has a positive contribution in public administrations. And the first one is, of course, to understand that we are public administrations. We are not startups. We are not private companies. There is a context in which public administrations operate, which is very important to acknowledge. So first of all, that means understanding the iceberg underneath a lot of public sector innovations. What AI works in some context may not necessarily work in another context. Reaching all the way to having AI work effectively in administration often means there is a hidden layer very much underneath of the culture, the regulatory landscape, the funding, the data governance that you may not necessarily see when it is promoted elsewhere, but is actually crucial to make sure that it works. And there's not also me, also others highlight very strongly the need to have this link between innovation and the key decision making, because otherwise what we're only going to see is the top of the iceberg, the flashy things, but we also need to understand all the work that needs to be done to get from innovation to the actual use thereof in government, acknowledging that we are in the public sector and we need to act accordingly. That, of course, means that we cannot rely on technology to do everything, right? So with AI, we expect it to help out and solve all the issues for us. It will not. It will likely not do so because there are certain things AI technologies cannot do. It's very good at automating simple tasks, not very complex social issues that might get too, well, it might get too easy perspective thereof. Or what you see is that AI cannot do it, right? So predicting who will be a millionaire in the future or who is going to be a criminal in the future, it cannot do that. You cannot predict the future that much. And it may lead to a lot of incidents, right? So the fact that there is an AI incident database shows that there's risks of trying to apply the technology for every social issue. You need to understand very well what you're trying to solve and how AI can maybe help there. And that, of course, brings to a very important key category is the internal expertise and competences, especially because AI used in governments is a digital government transformation project, and it requires internal expertise. There's a lot of possibilities to work with the private sector, and you should work with the technology companies, work with external consultants, but also understand that for the embedment of these technologies, you need internal competencies. Civil servants need to understand what is this AI that we're working with? How does it work? How can I improve my work with these technologies? And also very crucial to even start, of course, any innovation process in your administration, someone needs to be able to see the potential application with a practical need in the administration. And for that, they need the right competencies to do so. What is also important with some of the early successes I've seen is not to cowboy around. Be mindful of the risks, follow ethical and legal guidelines, such as the high-level expert group assessment list, to already identify certain risks that may occur, because they will. And understanding what are the risks and taking the right steps already mitigates a lot of the potential failures of AI within your organization, but also backlash or illegality later on. So it's very important to follow these as well. And I think lastly, what is also crucial in my experience is to not forget who you're making the AI for, right? So are we doing AI for the sake of AI, or are we doing it to improve the people's life or the skill sets of those that we're making the AI systems for, right? So the firstly, that means citizens, right? So are the citizens that are being delivered AI services willing to have that? And that may change on the context, right? So certain countries are more accepting of AI than others. So that's important if you want to use chatbots as your main channel for services. If a lot of people do not understand what it is, how to work with it, it might not have the effect that you might think. Or if you're doing this for the internal staff members, you need to also understand their expertise. what you often see is that the models and the data science projects, the AI systems, are made in complete isolation from the actual people that are supposed to work with them. And then it can happen that, as one of my interviews quoted very nicely, you can create a perfectly accurate model that is completely useless. It provides completely useless information because you need to understand the business process, you need to understand the domain knowledge, and that is, of course, requires a strong collaboration between different stakeholder groups that might not normally work together on a day-to-day basis. And of course, the last one, and we will discuss this a bit later as well, is minding the gap between the pilots and implementation. What you often see is that for success in AI, you need to take a bigger picture. So you cannot just have a pilot, you need to also take into account the wider nature of the innovation cycle, right? Once you start using AI in the organization, you need to have ways to structurally adopt this, and not just having a small pilot that is often even externally funded, right? So what comes after that when it is successful? So we're still looking a bit for the best practices, but they are up and coming, right? So thinking big, starting small is usually a good highlight. So do a small test with AI, but also already start thinking about how can we scale this up later on. Become partners with the private sector. Make sure that there is collaboration from the start with internally, but also externally, right? AI is not a silo project. You need to work together with different people, either for data or skill sets or whatever, for data input. You need to be able to deploy AI project management practices, demystify certain expectations of AI, so both good and bad. Make sure that it is neither the Terminator robot, but also we don't leap into AI with a utopian view, but be realistic about its opportunities. Then, of course, understand the risks involved and tackle them from the start, and take into account the bigger picture. What will come next? How is this going to require transformation in our administration? And with that, I think we can go to the next speaker. I hope there's a brief introduction to AI now, and I'm looking forward to presenting a bit more specific examples later on.
Super. Thank you so much, Colin, for indeed guiding us into already some of the concepts, some of the thinking, some of the discussion. I'm sure that there will be quite some questions already at this stage. So before moving on to Sim, might be good, and also since we have a bit of time left, I think it might be interesting to take a couple of questions already at this stage, if you don't mind. So we know how it works. I see already Goran typing in his message in the chat, so please do. But I would say, Goran, open your microphone and put the question straight to Colin. Other colleagues, raise your hands, virtual hands, if you would like to get the floor and put the question to Colin. So please, Goran, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you, colleagues, and thank you.
I think
sorry, Goran.
I'm so sorry.
Sorry, my fault. I put you on mute.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Thanks again for this great presentation, Colin. I was actually inspired by many of the things. The last one was about this top of the iceberg and actually generating innovation and experimentation within the government. But still, I would go a little bit back to the policy making. And I was wondering, simply because these days we have so many things that were actually triggering ideas about how to actually validate AI-generated policy recommendations, especially because we have those aspects, so-called black boxes, for the ones that do not deal with the AI. It does relate to transparency and using plain or less technical language for the ones who may actually audit the entire process, and so also discuss about the outcomes of such AI-driven policy making. So Could you bit elaborate what has been done so far in order to mitigate those risks and to make any kind of improvements in that regards? And maybe perhaps also you could add a bit on so-called garbage in, garbage out aspect. Also for the audience to explain, it is related to actually verification of data sources. Today in the morning, Florian has talked a lot about ChatGPT and explained about the use of the chatbot. So we need also to speak about reliability of the data and also for policy making. So maybe these two aspects, Colin. Thank you.
Yes, very important question. So what I've seen, there is not AI being used fully out to make policy by itself, right? So this I have not seen yet. Maybe someone has done it, but I have not seen a complete delegation of policy making towards a machine. What is often, it is a combination, right? So one example is in Tallinn city, for instance, they are using computer vision to count the amount of cars that is in the city, and that is being used to base traffic information. There you can still see, in a sense, right? It's not that much of a black box, even though the underlying deep learning algorithm is a black box. You can still understand the counting. You can see a car as a car, right? So in that sense, it's still they still work together. But in other cases where exactly you get some output which is not clear how it comes to this, you see that it is often not included because of exactly this. Either it's because it's illegal, and secondly, I think you will also look like a bit like a fool if you're proposing a policy that nobody understands how the system comes to this suggestion. So in practice, you see it working together with traditional insights of the policymaker, try to make sense of what it is. And if it's not possible, usually it's discarded, right? So this is a bit in the policy, you have a bit of the clash between the system and the human expert, and depends a bit on the view you take. On the one hand, you have the positive narrative that AI will give new insights that the policymaker can then include, but I would say first needs to understand, verify, maybe build upon, right? So to see, but why is it these suggestions? There's always way to have a follow-up. The more skeptical list is they discard all the information that they do not agree with, as in they only base the suggestions on what was already their intended plan. So it's a more skeptical view. That this is still a bit also a black box, right? How this is being worked and how the computers work together. Then about, of course, the chatbot, right? So that comes with the garbage in, garbage out question. So a lot of the AI for policy making purposes, right? For instance, that one in Dublin that uses social media data, I would never fully 100% base my policy only on social media data because of obvious data gaps that exist on social media, and actually it's only Twitter data as well, right? So it's very small subset. But including it as part of the wider information gathering techniques, I would say, why not, right? A survey also has limitations, just as inviting 10 experts to your office and seeing what is the problem. So seeing it as an instrument, as a wider operators, I would see then you have more ways to validate and understand the ways. Generative language models, like ChatGPT, they are known for not being accurate, as in that's not the point is not to be Google. They are made to be conversational agents. So they will never tell a complete picture, but they might give you some starting points. I mean, we have seen in the news already, for instance, lawyers, right, that use ChatGPT for factual information, but it doesn't provide facts. Maybe not yet, but it doesn't do it now. So it's not made for this purpose. So I would never do that for policy.
Mm-hmm. Thanks so much, Colin. Thanks for the question, Goran. I see Florian's hand, and we have a question also from I think. Yes, Natasha.
Thanks a lot. Thanks, Nick. Thanks, Colin. This was great. I have a question. I'm not sure I can express it clearly. Now, we work with many countries and have seminars where we still discuss digital transformation of government. Yeah, so in my own country, Germany, I mean, there's not even good interoperability yet, and so on. And my question is, when we talk now, we are in the age of AI and all the possibilities. Do we still need to go through all the steps of digital government, or is there now, are the rules changing now? Does the question make sense? Yeah,
it makes perfect sense, and also anticipating a bit the future presentations, I think. So it's both yes and no, right? So yes, I would say you do need some legacy in digital government, because you have, on the one hand, more data, right? So if you don't have a digital process yet, you have limitations in having AI work on this, because you don't have data to based on your service. So if you still have it completely paper-based, you may have limitations in using AI for certain purposes. But on the other hand, what you also see is that AI is being used to support this digitalization process, right? So what I've seen, for instance, is AI that can recognize signatures or handwriting as a way to automatically change paper forms to a digital format. And then, of course, it helps also in this process. So the game has changed a little bit, but also in terms of mindset, capacity, infrastructure, and data availability, it is best to be a bit more advanced. And it is exactly one of the reasons why it has been a limited uptake, because a lot of administrations, they are still, well, having plenty of challenges with normal digital transformation. So that's a bit the short answer. Yes.
Great. Thanks.
Thanks, Colin. Well, we have I think, interesting question in the chat from Natasha on the issue of, well, responsibility, but also the liability. Like at the end, I mean, who's responsible? Are we still, as civil servants, public administration, or, well, is it the computer, the machine at the end of the day? I mean, I think her question is very interesting. If a citizen is losing his or her rights due to wrong information, well, where does it come to? I mean, who's liable? Who's reliable? Who's responsible at the end of the day? If you want to touch upon this issue in a question later on, Colin, please tell us. But if you want to answer shortly now, please do so.
It's a question that we can talk 2 hours about. I will not have an answer to be solved, but maybe a more thought experiment, right? So why will someone lose already based on one small data mistake, right? Why can we not change the system in such a way that there is room for leniency, human review when there is a mistake, right? So a lot of the cases that I've seen, not all, but many of the more better examples, in case there is a rejection of a service, there is always human review. There's very few cases where it is 100% AI system. There's always usually a person that reviews any rejection. The design of this, we can probably discuss more, right? So do the people working, reviewing have enough agency to meaningful do so, or, right? So are they actually really empowered, and are there ways to do it? But we can also find ways to make sure that citizens do not automatically lose benefits by one small mistake, right? There's a way to have more safeguards in place. Or maybe, as I think one professor once told me, have a notion of grace, right? So when you are uncertain, then just give it instead of rejecting. And I think that was also a nice way to base the services on.
Okay, thanks for this, I think, nuanced answer. Short one, Jose, because we need to move on.
Yes, if I may, only to follow up in the excellent question by Natasha. As a lawyer, my point will be that if the citizen asks the chatbot about how can I appeal this, the chatbot makes a mistake and tells you 20 days, and the legal deadline is 10 days, which is actually Natasha's question. I think now, even with our current laws of general administrative procedure, if the citizen could prove that the mistake was by the artificial intelligence, then the appeal will be considered on time. It's the same, for example, when you get a resolution and the public administration tells you have 20 days to appeal, and in reality you have 10 days, the deadline for your case will be 20 days. But this has to be clear in legislation. And then, of course, chatbots has to save all the logs. So then the citizen can obtain the proof if the citizen needs it. That will be my lawyer takes on her answer.
Thanks so much, Jose, for bringing in this this technical, I mean, this legal, but very important nuance and aspects into this. I think with this, and I don't see any further hands. Thanks a lot, Colin, for this first part already. As said, thanks for bringing in some nuance into the debate and the discussion. The different roles, government as a public administration, this triple role as a facilitator, also as a regulator, but definitely also as a user. Very interesting. Also the link between, well, AI in public administration means actually also like a true digital transformation, which then also includes all the elements of the capacities, the competence, everything that is below the waterfront. Really interesting, and we will definitely get into this into more details. Immediately already now, I would say, because I think with this is like an excellent moment to switch to our next speaker. Great to have Sim Sukut with us. Great to see you as always, Sim. Sim is the former Chief Information Officer from Estonia, and Sim is now the partner in Digital Nation. And as already said this morning with the introduction from Minister Jovanovic from Serbia, it's really important to, well, approach this the whole, well, fourth and fifth industrial revolution really from a both strategic but also from a very operational point of view. And I think this is what they've really done nicely and greatly in Estonia. So with all of this, Sim, the floor and the screen is yours. Let me just see, because I think I need to make you quickly a co-host so that you can share your screen. There you go, Sim.
Lovely. Well, first of all, hope you hear me well. Very good morning to everyone still, and glad to join you. Lots of friends in the call here, so, and lots of new ones hopefully as well. I'll be happy to just say a few words about how we approach the whole artificial intelligence uptake in Estonia, and really perhaps speaking from strategy perspective. So how did we go about this, and how did we think about the strategy for that? And as with everyone, happy to take a bit of chat and discussions based on that. But I already heard the sort of end point of the previous discussion too. I think this nicely frames some of the talk and chat here and some of the discussion here, in a sense that we really saw AI as the next level, the next stage, the next evolution of digital transformation of our government, not like a thing in itself, right? So it's like just a step in a sort of longer and continuous journey, at least for us. I'll share my slides. They are really more from background, but hopefully helpful as a context, and hopefully not to repeat it to what my teammate Colin has been already spoken about. But so I'm from Digital Nation these days. We work with governments around the world to help them do the digital things better and build a future-ready digital societies, as we say. And one of the topics we focus on is AI. So I'm the more pleased to really speak here today as well. Now, Estonia, the context really is that so we've been digital for long, as many of you know. And like I said, AI at some point became us for the next stage. How did we start? Well, we really started still from scratch. And the context, and perhaps like a personal story here, is that in 2013, 10 years ago from now, we were at the time elaborating a longer national digital agenda. So what should be the overall country strategy going ahead? And we spoke at the time with, anyone and everyone we could, all the way to, some of the best sort of thinkers of the world, all the way, and consultants like partners and things. In a sense, what are the trends we should take into account? So if we plan a journey ahead, what's going to be on the horizon that we better, be ready for? And we specifically, 10 years ago, asked, is artificial intelligence a thing to take into account? Everybody said, no, it's going to be like, it's still in labs, it's still like, this sort of very nascent stage, and just go on with the rest of the transformation business. 2013. I entered the office of government CIO. I became the government CIO in 2017, a few years later, and AI was in my pocket. So basically, this is to me to say that it happened very fast at some point. Things just took off in a way. And so also in my time, 2017, I really saw that, look, we have to start working as Estonia on AI, even if we start from scratch, because otherwise we will miss out. And that led to then a task force coming together, and we started really working on the first strategy for the, the national AI policy plan and the strategy from that. And as we had to start from scratch, by that I mean that there was not that much really talent and focus on AI anywhere, really, even in the universities, right? So we had very little base to build from. So a lot of effort went really to start building this base capability, retraining people, getting more sort of, machine learning specialists out there, trying to incentivize companies and agencies to start trying things out. And we really took a very short-term perspective. So if we say strategy, we actually looked at 2 years first. So how to get the ball rolling was the idea. And then say iteratively, if we got the ball rolling, then we build the next one. And now they're, I think, about to have version 3 of the national strategy in government. Secondly, we clearly said, okay, so if we want to get moving fast, how can we piggyback on existing measures? So as opposed to, let's say, getting new funds in there, can we reorient some of the existing public sector digital funding or some of the existing research and development grants and mechanisms to support this direction? So to get the ball rolling, we didn't invent new. We rather said, how can we use existing tools we have in our toolbox as a government, as a policy, as a funder, and then gear them in an AI direction or prioritize AI as a topic for them. But the cornerstone of Estonian overall national AI strategy became basically the dimension that government has to be the lead user. So a lot of national AI strategies usually try to get private sector uptake up first. We went the other way around. Why? Because again, we had this maturity base of a digital government to build on, and Colin touched upon this. It greatly helps to have that. So we saw that if government gets things in motion, then the rest of the economy might follow. And indeed, that has happened. How do we get the ball rolling? Well, first of all, we took a very pragmatic approach. We said, hey, yes, you can dream big in AI, but what is the fundamental thing to solve for in Estonia in any kind of transformation is our small size and the need for productivity. AI, even in its simplest machine learning forms, is about productivity. It allows you to unlock next things and automate next routines that humans have been doing so far. So we really said, hey, well, these are low-hanging fruits. There's a lot of concrete, narrow, specific use cases we can build on and to get the ball rolling, because that was the intent of the strategy. So things we started doing, for example, using AI, machine learning to detect unusual patterns in basically our data exchange traffic to find out if there's a cyber incident. So pattern detection. Using satellite imagery to orient and direct inspections of agricultural subsidies better. So very concrete case, very specific data set, training to understand if farmers are using subsidies properly or at all, right? And by the way, something like this, paid itself back in a few months already, because it was now previously inspectors were going blind around the country. They're just randomly choosing plots to inspect. Now they just went where there was a suspicion of some misuse. Another concrete example we built up was, and by the way, this is a very interesting one because we borrowed the core models from the Netherlands, for example. So there's a lot we can piggyback on other countries' efforts in this, is how to match job seekers with job places you have for them. And so basically you do this matchmaking based on sort of, again, machine learned analysis, and it trains and the model gets better all the time, as well as figuring out people's risks. And so we can target preemptively unemployment measures for them and offer support services for them. And all the way to something like, I always like pets. So we now have real-time machine transcription based on recognizing speech in Parliament, I think in courts as well. So this means that even 2 years ago, somebody was still typing up the meetings of Parliament as the meeting was happening in person, while our phones can do that. So we just had to train it for Estonian language. Again, a very concrete, technically complicated, but business-wise or value-wise, very concrete application like that. So this is my point of saying that we went the pragmatic way. We didn't just choose one area like, I don't know, health or something. We said, hey, how can we get concrete practical use across the board? basically mainstreaming is the policy buzzword, right? The uptake and effort. And to support this, how was it possible? Let's keep a few things as background. What made it possible? Well, first of all, the practical approach. And pragmatism also for us means that we don't do things because they are cool or fancy technologically, but because they give some practical benefit. We didn't use chatbots. That was my example here before I skipped. We didn't use chatbots in COVID time because they were like a neat, fancy way to answer people's, inquiries about crisis management. No, we used them because we had a practical need for that. Because call lines, call centers were getting overloaded. We need to direct people away and get the responses faster even than that. That's where chatbots came in. So practical uses. A practical use means that actually, it pays off as well. Secondly, we started systematically to think. So if we start from a zero base, how can we support different agencies in government to really start experimentation? So we started evangelism, trainings, capacity building. So we brought in like innovation measures. We like I said, we reoriented the measures we had for digital transformation anyway to now be AI focused and supportive. But the whole point was to say that we defined as a direction, a priority direction, and we geared the instruments we had to support it. The third thing, very, very important for us, was reuse and like a platform logic. So the cornerstone of our strategy became to say that if we invest as a government into certain machine learning models, for example, can we make them available as a platform for the next ones to reuse in next agency in government, but also even private sector, for example. So we started looking around, what are the common, usual, even machine learning functionalities that everybody needs. And mind you, for Estonia, this is a historic pattern. We've been platform thinking from day one, almost, with national identity, with actual data exchange. So trying to save a bit of money, save a bit of effort by solving common needs once for all. So we brought the same principle and logic to AI field as well. So for example, we identified certain common needs out there. We built 5 first ones out immediately in the first year or two, and next ones now have followed. So even for something like a chatbot, there is a common module now that the next agency can pick up, retrain with their data, and they have it up and running way faster than otherwise. They don't have to build it from scratch. They just have to train it for their purpose. So this sped things up a bit. And another example I have here is basically a common open source component to figure out patterns from text, masses of text. So for example, now that's been reused again and again to anonymize historical data, like court proceedings, for example. So build it once, reuse it, you get ahead much faster. And so the whole logic was to say that if we build, let's make it reusable. And another element of that has been that it's, by the way, reusable around the world, not just within Estonia. So it's open for everyone. We did a lot. We really believe in open innovation. So how do you get beyond your skills gap? Well, one way is to try to train and recruit people fast. But we also went that way to say that, can we work openly with private sector experts? So we started a certain, what we call test bed framework, where we said, hey, our government is open for you to come build your machine learning applications on. We don't pay you money, but we don't also charge you. So that was basically exactly no money is exchanged, but it's joint development effort. Government gets the benefit of having access to new technology, new solutions, new services even. Companies get the benefit of a reference, and they can have a first pilot customer to try things out with, because a lot of them are in the novel space as well. So that sort of framework, we had to build like a legal contractual framework for that, and that started supporting a lot of even the platform building for us. And finally, we didn't come to this at first because we were a bit, I guess, too hopeful, too optimistic. So it was a bit of lesson tough learned. But so to get the first use cases was easy enough, but we soon hit the wall that actually a lot of data was not quality and structured enough. So we had to really start and bring back and go back to basics in data governance to ensure that data is there in a sufficient form and quality to build all these things on top on. So working on AI necessitated a refocus on data governance and really applying it systematically through government sector. So these are the elements of our strategy, if you wish, and the outcome of that is that currently you have I think they say that more than 100+ use cases, whether live or tried and piloted and so forth. So it's like really across the whole board like that. The ball got going and rolling like was the intent. And to finish up here, so based on all of this, the latest government digital agenda says that the aim, one of the priorities of overall transformation is to make all government AI powered, is the word. And secondly, another sort of very big initiative is what's called bureaucrat, which is to say that all of government information, all of government services should be available in the next stage from AI-based virtual assistants. So think about a Siri in your phone. Think about, a smart assistant in your fridge, in your car, whatever it might, you're going in a way. So these will be more and more your people's ways to get services. So government services should be linked to that in a way. And so that's what the government is now building up. And, it's not a theory, but actually live components are out there. So it's like a thing in action already. So what we see is that it radically might change how the quality and the customer experience of government services, because now it's just like a voice message or like a voice interaction away. Let's say if your passport is about to expire, currently you might at best get a proactive email saying, hey, your passport is expiring, here's a link, come log in, apply again, whatever. Now, something like Siri can say, hey, see, your passport is expiring, shall I order you a new one? And the rest happens in the back end. So that's the sort of radically different experience that we see that assistants and the work on that can allow to build. I will stop here. Yes, in Digital Nation, we do a lot of stuff to help you guys on AI strategies, so you can check that out later. And I'll be keen to really take a few questions now. Thank you.
Thank you, Sim, for laying out the Estonian work and background. So colleagues, floor to you. If anyone wants to direct a follow-up question or specific question to Sim, this might be an excellent moment to do so. So raise your hands, virtual hands, and then we pass on the microphone. There was one question, please, Sim.
I will raise my hand first, actually. I wanted to pick up on something that was asked from Colin, perhaps, and then I'll give people time to think about next questions. Responsibility. We saw this very clearly in at least government sense. And the thinking is that AI is not special. It's just another tool in a digital toolbox, as digital technology is just another tool. How we choose to use the tools, that's our call. So if government is using AI solutions, government is still responsible, not somehow the vendor, whatever like that. It's always the one who chooses to use a tool. And that simplification makes life so much easier in terms of liability. And I mean, that's even what we sort of see should apply in private sector space. So it puts a burden and a possible innovation barrier in, but fundamentally it frees up so much discussion. And so that's the clarity we immediately went for in terms of interpretation and principle of law.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for this, Sim. Goran, please.
Hi, Sim. Thanks again
hello.
For this very good retrospective and also triggering our thinking on what comes next. I was very much interested in Digital Nation, so I looked a bit on the net, and I understood that you are really having everything put in one place, in a sense like mapping out what you need to do from strategy wise and also operational wise. As someone who works both in digital transformation and quality management, I was particularly interested into change management that you are actually convening in ensuring governance to adopt and actually reflect on the AI transformation. How do you actually see the role of quality management in these regards? If I may say, my personal idea is that it can really suit as an overarching framework. And I'm sure that some colleagues present here, like Tihana, would share this idea with me, because we are trying to mingle somewhere in between. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, thanks really, Goran, and always good to see you. If I'm honest with you, I think it comes down to a bit of hats that we are all used to, right? I mean, who comes from quality management perspective? Somebody comes from, I don't know, innovation management perspective. Somebody comes from change management perspective. I think they all work fine as long as there is a consistent approach. And to me, whatever is the approach to take, quality management is actually a thing in a toolbox and the instruments of quality management that you should apply to just make sure that, you know, whatever frame you're using, in the end, you still produce good outcomes that you intended to at a sufficient level. So that's my sort of practical thinking. My own frame of mind, being as framed as I am, is mostly from change management perspective in that sense, to say that fundamentally what we're dealing with when we're dealing with digital transformation, with AI or otherwise, we're dealing about transforming how we work in government. And so to me, that's a management challenge in a sense to say, we just have to take our agencies, ourselves, our teams to a change journey. Change means adoption of technology, among other things, but really just, you know, we have to get them ready for that. And in that process, quality management tools are very helpful. So, but again, that's my frame of thinking. You can approach it from quality management as well, and then all the other aspects become your tools. As long as you do it systematically, it gets to the same result, I would say.
Thanks so much, Florian.
Thanks, Sim. It was brilliant again. I wanted to hear your prediction of the level of disruption AI will have on the state. So we talk a lot now. Actually, one of the priorities is the state needs to be an attractive employer. In many countries in Europe, there's an aging civil service. We need new people. Are you predicting maybe we don't need so many people anymore, so this issue might even fall away? Or how do you think it will change the work of civil servants in the future?
Well, hi to you as well. I believe it's a disruptive force. That was the reason why we started. And I mean, even in my time as a CIO, I insisted that we have to get running on the topic. We can't wait. Secondly, that's why the current Estonian digital strategy has one of its basically like biggest priorities and pillars, right? And exactly for the disruptive potential you outline, the core challenge for Estonia is still the same. It's a shrinking and aging population, right? And the same thing, you know, the less people you can have in public sector, the more it's preferential, because then the rest of the economy can develop. You're not shrinking the others out, so to speak, right? But that's like a positive way of thinking in a way. I think I fully would agree with you, even from a negative way of thinking, saying, hey, that might be the only way to survive as a public sector, like you outlined. Why I believe in such disruption? Well, first of all, because the technology is, as a technology, all things AI are only picking up in a way. And secondly, I really believe in this because of the work we did in Estonia. I mean, digital transformation for us was always about trying to get productivity up there, right? And be more effective as a government. But the marginal benefit was like plateauing. You know, we didn't get enough of the next steps anymore. Now, when we added AI to the component, we hit like the next level again, like the next exponential curve again. And that's where a lot of my faith comes from. Secondly, what I want to say here is to say that this is, I think, is my bottom line message in these sort of conversations always. If something will be a disruption, is upon us in governments, upon you in governments. It will not disrupt you unless you let it to. Or, so basically that goes back to my whole point that we're talking about transforming how we work here. If we choose to manage it, if we choose to use it for disruptive force, then it will be. Otherwise, disruption will happen around us and governments are still stuck in their old ways. So it doesn't happen by itself, but there's a very big potential for it to happen if we make it that.
Interesting, super interesting.
Thanks much.
Just attract your attention, colleagues, for the ones who are not following the chat. Like in parallel, there's also interesting comments being put on the chat. Also, question I would like to follow up, maybe to Sim here. It's about the legal framework. Natasha, coming on the well, to what extent the legal framework, also in Estonia, but also other countries, to what extent the legal framework followed, I think, the strategies and the thinking that you have been doing in Estonia, Sim. To what extent AI was, well, regulated, was also prescribed, but prescribed, I would say, then more in the sense of being regulated throughout.
Yeah. So when we started our strategy had 4 pillars of work. uptake in government, uptake in private sector, capability and skills and research, and legal framework. So from day one, we understood, because even for the discussion we have here, this has to be a pillar of that. We have to basically figure that out. Our first strategy was to do two things, because mind it was in the context of quite a few years ago. First of all, to say Europe was already thinking about starting AI regulation. So our strategic choice to say that we will not preempt that in a way, and we'll move when the rest of Europe moves. Otherwise, we do it double or three times or whatever. But secondly, to not be halted or stopped in the meantime, we still went back and said, but is there something, or basically, what are our boundaries of action in our current legal framework? And that means that often in Estonia, we don't necessarily change legal framework, but we agree on interpretation. So the example I had with the responsibility, we don't have to somehow bring a law saying that, look, with AI, that's how responsibility works. We just agreed on an interpretation that AI is not a tool. Tools have this responsibility framework. Good. So we just apply it again. So do you see what I mean? So a lot of it, I think, in legal work is not to do a next law, but actually to also make a case how the current one holds. And that's a way to fast track a lot of innovation. So, but at this point, well, going to my first point, the legal stuff. So Estonia has moved along with the European AI framework or regulative framework advancements. Now it's only coming together, right? So now it's gonna there's gonna be some domestic law and stuff made as well as a follow-up, like anywhere in Europe. But we agreed on interpretation, and that already unlocked a lot of stuff. But to a certain level, for example, there still are no automated decision-making, exactly because that needed a specific regulation to be added. And that's now hopefully coming. So all the AI in Estonia so far is machines augmenting human public servant actions, helping and assisting and so forth.
Very helpful. And I think also a good answer to Natasha's question. But if not, Natasha, feel free to come in the chat or just taking the microphone and the screen, of course. Any other questions, colleagues, at this stage to Sim, or any input into the discussion? Feel free so. Before we move on, just we are punctual on the agenda and schedule. That's great to see. But nevertheless, if there is a question, a hand, I see one, Jose.
If I may, Sim, what is your take on the reduction of civil servants needed when you automated many tasks in public sector, like, like transcription in? What is your plan, how to make a strategy about all these people that now are redundant?
Well, first of all, going back to what I was perhaps confusingly saying before, for Estonia, even politically speaking, it's been desirable to downsize public sector. So that's part of the answer, saying that, in a way, the policy line is that that's actually is the aim, right? But secondly, obviously, you need to, I'm not talking about public sector now, but you need to see about sort of, the skilling and reskilling effort, that they don't become idle in the labor market, right? It's just out there. Because even if, more basically new jobs are out there in the private sector, they need advanced skills. So the skilling effort is out there. I'll be honest with you, Estonia hasn't figured it out. I don't think any country has fully figured it out yet at that scale it's necessary. But certain initiatives, programs, retrainings, curriculum developments, things are happening on the front at least, right? So it's like skilling effort has to match, but fundamentally, again, in Estonian context, it's a desirable goal. And that's exactly the aim of even using AI, to get rid of people in routine tasks, so that the ones that remain in public sector can do a more meaningful and valuable job as well.
Good ones, thanks. Any more questions, reflections, inputs, thoughts? Not for the moment. Okay, then let me thank you again, Sim.
Thank you, and good luck with AI.
If you can stay around, of course, always welcome. But if not, then we meet up later for sure. So many thanks.
Unfortunately, we meet up later. Bye, guys.
That's what I was expecting, but still. But thanks for being here, Sim. We'll catch up. Ciao, ciao. Then I would say back to you, Colin, for the second part, diving, I would say, even more into the practical applications. I mean, you touched already upon some really nice examples, But I think you will do even more so in the next part. Before we then also widen the scope, geographical scope, I mean, into the Western Balkan area and region. So Colin, back to you. You commented in the chat related to existing AI regulation being part of GDPR. So if you want to extend on this, feel free to do so. You have the floor.
Yes, I won't dwell on it, but it's from my experience too, AI is not there's the risk of AI exceptionalism, right? So that it is so new that it suddenly doesn't fall under any existing laws, but that is of course a complete misconception. So a lot of the cases, and that's precisely also why some of the use cases in Europe has been discontinued, because they were actually already illegal. So not to start a debate on the AI Act, but I think there's already a lot of things that are being tackled by existing laws. They might just need a bit more enforcement to make it effective. But there's a lot of discussion. I think that's important to understand, right? And that we will touch upon it in the presentation actually, but that means the implementation context does not only depend on the GDPR or the AI Act, right? So if you have, and I cannot say that in advance, but I mean, imagine if a local administration has some law that healthcare needs to be, signed off by a signature. If that is a regulation in that specific context, that means that also AI will have to conform to this law, to the point that it might not be suitable to deploy it, right? So it's a nice starting point to the next slides, because there we go a bit more deeper into the adoption challenges as well that we follow. So without further ado, so let's. I hope you guys are still fresh after already an hour of presentations and discussions. But in this case, it will be a bit more concrete, and I would like to talk about some of the research findings, in particular that I have done in support with the AI Watch research. So this will be both AI strategies and then also some use cases with some lessons learned thereof. So there's some cases from Estonia that seem also touched upon, but now we have a bit more time to go a bit deeper into them. So just to introduce you to the AI Watch research. So this has been a unit research task of the JRC, which is the Joint Research Center, which is part of the European Commission, a bit like the scientific research branch, so to speak, if I put it bluntly. And as part of these activities, they have done a lot of research on the uptake of AI in general, so industry, the flow. So there's a lot of interesting material out there. And one of the subtasks was AI for public sector. So, and that I have been part of almost since its conception as an external. And that has been a bit of the foundation of my research. So we have done also different workshops, like the one here. You can even see me there on the right, where we had the first kind of discussions on AI used in public services, and different reports came out, right? So we had the first one, 2020, on an overview that has been updated last year with the European landscape. We also had a work on the pilots, and also a handbook with some policy recommendations, while aimed at the European Commission level. I think there's still a lot of insights for everybody here in each of these reports, actually. So feel free to find them afterwards to find some more material. So firstly, what we has also, of course, tried to understand are the different AI strategies within the EU. And I mean, it's a year old now, but I don't think there has been any new AI strategies since then in the European Union countries. This is a bit the overview, right? So almost everybody has an AI strategy in the EU. Some of them has already an update, or as Sim just told me, already a third update actually in Estonia is coming soon. So just to show the scene here. And of course, these AI strategies, they have different activities that they describe. There's a lot of usually a lot of text in each of them, of course, because they touch various aspects of AI. That includes the research, industry, citizens, legislation, and of course also, well, not always, but definitely some activities on AI in government. And that's a bit the focus of the next section, is to try to understand what these AI strategies discuss to improve AI in government, right? So how they're going to address different barriers, how they are going to stimulate the use thereof from a high strategic level. And we try to also classify some of these AI strategies into some loose categories based on the amount of activities and the type of activities they describe. And you see that some of them, they lean a bit more towards activities that are mostly related to improving the data, whereas others also lean a bit more towards working with external partners, and some of them, they have a bit more internal oriented, so it's just internal competencies. So very bluntly, best I would say are still the ones that have a blend of the different activities. But what are these activities then? This is a list. A sub-selection is not everything, but just to have a flow of the conversation. So different activities that the AI strategies often describe is a huge portion about improving data quality, data access for public administrations as the key requirement for AI, right? Others, they also highlight often some kind of ethical AI or other kind of design principles to help public administrations manage the projects, or how to tell them how they should apply AI as some kind of guidance. You also see different activities promoted at partnerships with the private sector as to leverage from the private sector's expertise and then put that into the public sector. You see also different activities to improve the internal competence, like just what we were discussing with SIEM, as a way to make sure everybody has the right trainings and the skill sets within public administrations. And of course, linked to that is different on knowledge and awareness. So not necessarily just training, but just having a general understanding of what this AI is and how it could be used. There are also activities that are related to the introduction of new AI-related legislation or reviewing existing ones to adjust it, either to have a better support, but also to allow for AI used more structurally, right? So this may also mean, for instance, in Norway, where they have a pilot legislation within the AI strategy. So it allows administrations to pilot with AI for a set amount of time, and not just AI, but this is by law allows them to do pilots. And well, if that is a pillar needed to do it, this can of course be included. And also you see strategies often highlighted some form of new teams, an AI team within ministries or new institutions even, that help regulate or support AI used in government. So a bit more specific, I made a couple of copy pastes from the strategies. So for instance, on improving data access and management, and these are a lot of different activities, but for instance, what the Czech AI strategy highlights is that they are creating a binding administration data availability plan for AI use. So, and that includes data standards, right? So as a key activity to create this data governance that also SIEM was highlighting is so crucial to have the baseline to kickstart different AI initiatives from. Without that, well, it might be very tricky, or as he also told, you might discover later on that it is actually not as high quality as you might assume. So having a data plan within the administrations is of course a key instrument. More on the ethical guidelines, Austria, for instance, highlights that the framework conditions will be created to ensure the compliance with human rights and security of AI throughout its entire technical life cycle. So they make also a framework for public administrations to adhere to and what to follow when they are using AI technologies. So if they are all there, I'm not so sure, but this is at least discussed in the strategies. Others, they highlight then again the partnerships, right? So and these range in a wide variety of different ways, but For instance, in Ireland, they highlight a couple of different ones, such as having more dialogues with the private sector, organizing hackathons, or using pre-commercial procurement of innovative solutions, or including AI, as a way to have better public procurement offers, but also to help public administrations understand this AI market better, right? So doing procurement is not so easy, especially when it comes to procuring AI products. Actually, it's quite challenging, I would say. And that requires also awareness and skill sets in understanding this technological market. So Ireland has a really clear activity to make sure that public administrations can partner with private sector as much as possible to use AI themselves. On the other hand, of course, you also need to have internal expertise, and France highlights this very strongly in their strategy, right? Public administrations must equip themselves with the skills to understand, identify, and fight against forms of algorithmic discrimination, especially when it affects basic services, and that is then their own services. So as a clear need that also within the administration, this needs to be supported. And also a lot of other strategies, then they also highlight some training programs that will be made available, funding for training courses, or as a part of their national career system, that there's also now AI courses being done in the training, such as some examples. Awareness campaigns on AI are, for instance, also mentioned in Estonia, right? So the spread of knowledge is the key. Exchanging of experiences, best practices within the country, within the ministries, within their own public administration, to share these examples of AI in different ways, and also discuss in a free way what are the risks that they take. And in Netherlands, for instance, too, they even organize a prize for the worst failure, right? Just to have public administrations share what also didn't work, what completely went wrong, and so they can share from this experience. I think is very important, because I will also touch upon it later, but very often we don't share, and we don't know so much about the use of AI yet, because we're not so transparent in the successes and the failures. Another legislation act, for instance, from the Netherlands that is in the AI strategies, is that they have a legal responsibility to provide insight into the use of AI. And this was actually before they introduced a new legislation that also includes a mandatory, or soon to be mandatory, AI register for all public administrations to show which AI systems they are using within their ministry, as a way to improve transparency about the AI applications, what purpose, what data is being based on, etc. Right? That can all be done by law, but you also see other kinds of legislation that is being tackled because they block unnecessarily the use of AI in a public sector context, right? Think about legislation that shows, we need to have a handwritten signature for any service. If that is still there, or in Japan, for instance, they had a law that requires a floppy disk for most of the public administration, right? So if that is still there and it's not tackled, it significantly hinders the potential use of AI, because you cannot use it for all the potential applications. But what is still often missing from the AI strategies, and I can talk about the different applications, is despite that all of the European Union's countries have an AI strategy, there is still a significant focus on AI in government. Most of the attention goes on business, research, legislation, and this is of course very important, but it is noteworthy, right? So there's usually a lot of activities to prove the readiness of businesses to adopt AI, creating new frameworks, more funding, reskilling of workers. But then when it comes to their own internal administration, these activities are not available, or they are done in such a small scale that you might argue that they could not have been done at all, right? What I also noticed is that most of the administration, the strategies focus on improving the data-related factors in public administrations, which is of course understandable, given that AI requires high-quality data in large volumes to often be trained. But as I will touch upon later, this is not the only challenge that public administrations face. some things like the internal capacity is then completely overlooked, right? What are the skills gaps in public administrations? Do we have all the right competencies? And most of the AI strategies, they hardly tackle this. They mention it, but they do not really describe any activities to improve this really strong gap, right? So some strategies, I was either the Slovenian or the Slovakian one, they were really quite harsh in their own assessment that they don't have enough skills within the administration. But then what are you going to do about it, right? So there needs to be also activities done to overcome that. And often funding, right, is needed for all those activities, but that is often exactly the element that the AI strategies do not really describe, right? So there's a lot of wishes, but how to fund it or how to do these activities or even funding to do AI in government projects, that doesn't need to be much, right? You can do a lot of things with small funding amount, but there needs to be a budget to do AI within these administrations. And what I often then see as well is that the promotion of more localized organizational AI strategies are not being promoted. So there's a national AI strategy, which is very nice, a strategic barrier, a strategic pusher, but most administrations themselves, they come with different challenges, different opportunities. They might need their own AI strategy that is still very, very limited. Only a few cities worldwide have their own AI strategies, and a few ministries like the Estonian tax administration, they have their own AI strategy, but most public administrations, they don't have that yet. So there's still a lot of work to be done on that respect. But then, of course, we are curious about the actual use, right? And the adoption rates is quite difficult. So researching this as part of the research I've done, you often see a lot of different figures thrown around. And I do this by accident, this slide with so many graphs, because it's very difficult to understand the use of AI technologies by administrations. The numbers vary very much, right? So in this one from Gartner CIO survey, there are different types of AI being discussed, but only a handful, like not more than 26% has used chatbots, but many other ways are far limited in their use. In municipalities, then on the other hand, you see that apparently 40% has deployed AI, but it's unclear to which extent how that is done. Then using enterprises, only 8% in Europe has used AI technology, which is also very limited of all the enterprises. So we see very different numbers on the adoption rates, but that, of course, it triggers me as a researcher to also understand, okay, but then what is really going on with all these different numbers? So we have our own inventory of the AI Watch. We gathered through these workshops, surveys, desktop research, policy analysis, a lot of different cases, also from studies done by member states of the EU themselves, to get a list of different cases. And in this inventory, and it's also open data, by the way, so you can find it. I can share the link later on. There's about 700 different examples of AI being used. In, of course, different levels of detail and different purposes. Most of them, as you can see in this analysis, are at the national level, but about a third is at the local, and some of them are in the regional level. And trying to have an understanding of what the purpose of AI then is, we also did a quick assessment, and we did see that almost, well, the big chunk of the use cases, they are there to support public services and engagement with citizens. And I would say a large volume of that are, for instance, chatbots as the main way to have this interaction with services with citizens. So chatbots are very popular, low-hanging fruit usually, to implement some form of AI. But there are also a lot of ways to improve the enforcement capability. So a quarter of them were more enforcement related. So inspection, helping out with making sure people adhere to the rules. 22% was a bit more analytical, right? So not so much a clear reason, but usually in support of policy making or decision making. 16% was more for internal management, and surprisingly 2% we found was related to really decision making, right? So just like Seem said, most of AI in government is not used for decision making, it's for augmenting or for informing people with more information. Yeah, so I have, of course, a different representation of the use cases, and I would like to highly stress that this is not representative. We don't know still from many countries what is their use of AI, because there's limited transparency or limited reporting of the use of AI. So there are a lot of skews, right? I'm Dutch myself. So surprise, surprise, the Netherlands has a lot of cases in the inventory because they also shared it with us. They did their own study. Estonia is also quite high in Italy, and Portugal. Doesn't mean that these countries are necessarily front runners in the use of AI. It's just that we've gathered more cases that were mentioned to be AI. And an assessment of the status also showed that despite the interest, we see still a lot of in developments and pilots, right? So a lot of the cases are not in routine use, or we could not identify this clearly, which is of course crucial if we want to understand how it supports the value and the function of government, right? So a pilot is usually too small scale to have an impact. And with that, of course, there are a couple of challenges many public administrations face, like we discussed before, and there are other rankings with some kind of general overview of if government organizations are ready for the use of AI. This is one overview, very high level, I would say. This is a bit more to the point in an organizational context, which is my own framework, but it builds on top of the past knowledge that we know that using any kind of innovation in government organizations is not so straightforward. That is both traditional ICT, but in particular, of course, also AI technologies that also have come with different challenges. And usually there's a lot of different forms of challenges that hinders adoption of this technology in governmental organizations. These are partly technological, partly legal, partly ethical, but also, of course, have to do with societal factors, cultural factors, and very simple factors such as funding or the perception of AI technologies. I mean, I would not say do not underestimate these perceptions, right? So if key decision makers in public administrations see AI as a threat, they will probably not spend time using the AI technology or experimenting with their adoption for their own administration. They will not do it. So building on top the past knowledge, I discovered a lot of different factors that help out, but you can place them in environmental factors, organizational factor, innovation-related factors, and even individual factors, right? Most innovation in government is still done by an individual who has to lead these initiatives, who is inspired by the use thereof, and he needs to be empowered by the organization in which he is active to do so effectively. And with AI, what we saw is, despite the strong overlap with the past innovation, there are, of course, the data-related factors, right? So the data sharing opportunities, the general ecosystem in which they are operating, and how much data has been made available to have meaningful insights on an issue that you want to solve with AI, or gain insights of. And that, of course, requires the presence of high-quality data in the administration itself, and also the good maintenance and the governance of the data to do so effectively. And with that in mind, there is still the need to invest in these basic digital government, also in support of many of these other factors, right? So you need the right IT resources for AI, but they come from the past. Or you need to start from scratch, but then it will take a bit of time before you get there. So what we try to also learn, of course, knowing that we have so many challenges and sometimes even simple barriers to the use of AI. So we looked at some case studies as well to understand, okay, so how did you manage to overcome these barriers, right? Given that there's so many and that's so difficult. So I will go through a couple of them. And this is, of course, a very, very brief description, but I think there's some key highlights here and there. So one of the examples is, for instance, in Belgium, they use also a predictive system to identify daycare services, that are more likely to be in need for inspections. They have a limited inspection capacity, and they need to understand where to go. So it was one of the first also data analytics projects of this agency to have more targeted interventions. And one of the key lessons learned from the use of this technology is to see AI as an empowerment. But look, the key is here, civil servants themselves, right? The inspectors that have to work with the system, because if it's perceived as a threat to their job, they will reject it or not use it, or straight out it will be blocked, any initiative. But if you help them to enhance their expertise and knowledge to have more targeted interventions, they would be more likely to use the technology. In similar fashion, there was this case in Estonia that also seen just briefly introduced. The use of satellite data for the detection of mowed grasslands is a European subsidy requirement. But what is important about this case as well is that the process thereof was a long research project that then eventually translated between a collaboration between the university, the Agriculture Registers and Information Board, ministry, also to share resources, data, and expertise, but even the infrastructure of the modeling, right? The administration had no large data center, so they worked together with other administrations to get the right resources. And there can be some time between research projects and actual implementation, but now it's up and running. The Greek government, they also used AI system at the border during the COVID pandemic crisis. And what is very interesting about this case is that it was not developed with these black box algorithms that we often highlight, right? AI is not just black box algorithms. It's not just highly deep learning just to do it. So what they did actually is to not go for these mathematical optimal ways for higher accuracy rates, but taking a look at the context of the implementation. And there they quickly understood is if we do a black box algorithm with a higher accuracy rate, nobody will use it, nobody will understand it, and nobody will follow up on the recommendations. Hence, they made it a more simpler AI system that is more transparent, easier to understand, practical, and effective. And that was seen as a very crucial design consideration to have this system up and running in such a short time as well during the COVID crisis. But I think is also an important consideration for many other projects on AI in government, right? Do you need a very complex AI system, or can you have a more simpler variant that might make more mistakes, but works better in collaboration with people? The Danish Business Authority, they also use a variety of AI. I would say this is quite an advanced administration when it comes to the use of AI. They have a big team. They use a lot of different models together. But what is very important to get to that point, they also developed a whole methodology. They call it the X-ray methodology, to have a very strong governance of the systems within the administration, right? So they track what is the model supposed to do. They check how it should be used in different processes, understanding the needs of the people working with the models and adjusting the system accordingly. And they deploy I would say, very strict data governance practices within the administration to make sure that people do not misuse the different models for purposes they were not built upon, but also to make sure that the data that comes in the system is actually of high quality, to ensure general trust in the system as well. They use different ethical principles. It's very interesting how they organize it there. In Amsterdam, they also use an AI system that helps detect garbage and objects on the street. So they use this AI system, they trained it with relatively little resources to identify trash, and then you can pick up the trash with the truck afterwards to improve the livability of the environment. What is interesting from this case is that despite its interesting application and also the often presented nature thereof, it is not in use anymore, right? So it was only a pilot. They had no funding available for the routine implementation, and also there are some ethical concerns that pop up. later on. So this is actually one that is potentially interesting, but they could not overcome these adoption issues, right? So even a leading city in AI as Amsterdam faces these issues too. Another case in Belgium I found quite interesting was also a system very similar to the one used in Estonia to help the upskilling and retraining of people that are looking for jobs. So they have also a relatively complicated AI system to link new competences to job seekers, which skills they might lack, and helping them retrain later on in a more effective way. By checking the market data, the competencies, and also which jobs require which competencies. So that is quite a complex but interesting system and has been regarded as quite successful. And what is very important is that complexity, that a lot of work has been done to keep it up to date, right? It's not just a one-time project. It requires constant maintenance, checking if the system works as well, especially in a complex environment such as the labor market, which is constantly changing. You constantly need to adjust it. And two other cases here. So the one in Veripol that I also highlighted is what is quite so they use it to detect false police reports. And it started as an academic small pilot in one police administration. And it took a lot of work to scale this up throughout the country, right? So just one successful pilot in one place doesn't mean the whole country immediately benefits. So they had to scale up this pilot to national-wide uptake, and now it's a system that has a far wider adoption, but it requires also work to do so. And the other one is Una, which is a chatbot in Latvia, one of the first ones actually, that also answers different questions about the registration of businesses, has been regarded as very successful within the public administration because 44% of the questions are taken care of by the chatbot. So the staff can handle more difficult requests. So they had a lot of phone calls with always the same questions, and they now have a lot more time to handle the more difficult requests. So from all these experiences, what is, I think, very important to understand is that just merely the adoption of AI also does not necessarily mean the service immediately improves, right? It might have a certain time lag, and you need to also understand the internal perspective of how can we best work with the AI system, how can we augment our staff members, how can they use the technology itself to improve the performance of the institution. Just AI is not going to do it. And you need to grow the government with the ambitions you have with AI, right? So do you have the right technical infrastructure needed for a small start, but what goes on in the future? Skills the same, leadership the same, maybe even the recruitment service might be changed and needs to be changed to keep up with these ambitions for using AI to make sure the organizational context follows. And then, of course, it is easier to do just an analysis of the data than it is to change the organization, right? So this is really a core message that if we want to change the way governments work, it comes from the public sector leaders, right? We have to adjust the organizational context with AI. Otherwise, initial adoption might be successful, but then still end nonetheless, because we don't think strategically about AI use in the government organization. It's not a gimmick technology. It should require a long-term vision, maybe even this AI strategy for their own context, what to look for. And then the readiness of AI, of public administrations to use AI may actually differ substantially, right? So we have all these barriers that we know for AI. Some of them overlap, but some of them are very specific to maybe specific organizations. And what I've seen is that the organizations that may benefit the most from AI, because they have limited resources, they might need AI to really help them to take up some tasks. They actually suffer from most of these barriers because of the limited past digitalization or limited internal skill sets or funding resources. So we need to find a way to also level the playing field to make sure that they can all benefit from this technology, and maybe start with simpler technology, right? We don't all need to have the most difficult ones. Start simple and see where it leads to. So with that, thank you very much, and I'm very looking forward to your questions again.
Thank you so much, Colin. And I have the firm impression that you could talk for the whole day, probably the rest of the week on this topic. You have so much fascinating material and insights to share. And I think with this opening already, also the way to the next speaker, reflecting on the state of play, but also future options for the use of AI in public administration in the Western Balkans. But just before opening to Art and pass the floor to Art, are there any immediate questions to Colin at this stage on the insights Colin just shared with all of us? Yep, I see Goran. Please go on.
Just a quick question.
Yes.
The study that Colin participated in related to beyond pilot sustainable implementation. Have you made any correlation between what those type of activity has made with this AI adoption rate? And simply because you did stress about what are the key challenges, and I haven't understood, has this type of incentives contributed to uptake, and would it be what was the reason? I mean, obviously in this object detention kit in Amsterdam was because of lack of finances. Has it been done anything within piloting process to low down the chances to be scaled up? Thanks.
Yes, so what I'm like, this is very quite new, because it's already quite a thing if public administrations are using AI technologies in some form or fashion, right? That's already quite a success in most of the innovation research, and also I think in general. So what is very recently popping up is that, well, we have these initiatives, but they don't stick or they don't scale. So there seems to be, and I don't have a very conclusive answer yet, why, that having a start is apparently easier than a more routine use of the technology for various reasons. So what I have seen are a couple of key barriers that might resurface after an initial success, right? So think about the funding. So usually funding is given on projects. Projects usually are designed to make some AI system or an ICT solution, and that is the scope of the project. So the funding is available for making the solution, but the funding is not there to help implement or to change the organization. So very often you see that, well, the pilot was covered by the funding, but then the wider transformation is not. That may be the reason, because there's no more funding available, or because the funding needed to change the way the organization work is underestimated, right? There might be a lot of things that pop up, like the legislation that needs to be changed, or maybe they need to hire staff members with more AI-related expertise to keep track of the system. They might need to hire or retrain the staff members to work with the system, or in case of their job replacement, well, have them find something new, retrain them. And all those extra things come into play in a later phase that might explain why the follow-up is limited. So in the case of Amsterdam, there were, I think, mainly 3 pillars. So one was the funding. It came from an external funding source from the Dutch government that was not aimed at implementation. The game was experimentation, which is fine. But then, of course, if it's successful, you would like to have a follow-up. The second one is also the ethical issues, right? So in the Netherlands, they were it was fine for a pilot to drive around with cameras that could detect objects, but to have that as a routine part of the administration, they felt more uncomfortable. So it was put on hold to also understand these ethical implications of having these kind of cars driving around, which is, I think, is also a fair reason to hold it. And I think the last one, also managerial change. as in the departments had internal conflicts because the trash department might not really like an AI system checking on their work, whether they do so successfully. It's a very human reason, right? That's why it was put on hold, as far as I'm aware. Maybe there's even more reasons, and it might come back in the future. But those kind of reasons you see very often in trying to understand, okay, but why did it stop? But we don't know so much yet.
Thank you, Colin. What do you think, colleagues? Should we move on to have a look at the Western Balkan experience? So thanks so much, Colin, for all this work and for giving us this insights. So with this, we move on to the final speaker of this morning, of the day. I'm really pleased to have Arte Alishani with us. Arte is currently working at the University of Tartu, where he's carrying out his PhD under the Horizon 2020 funding, as you can also see already on the screen here, focusing his work on data-driven decision-making and digital transformation in public services. But I think it's really interesting to have Art with us, because he has done so much work, research on the use of AI for public service delivery in the Western Balkans. So please, Art, really looking forward to have your insights on this topic for the Western Balkan regions. All yours.
Thank you very much for your introduction. Can you hear me actually?
Yes, loud and clear.
And can you see my slides also?
Yeah, it's not yet in presentation mode, but we can see them ready. Now it should come. Yes, all good. Now we have this this double screen. I mean, one of the current slide and one moving to the next. Maybe this is better. Super. Thanks, Art.
Thank you very much also for your introduction, and also to the previous speakers for giving such a good overview and giving us some really good hints about the general discussions on AI, but also about some practical examples as well. So now I will focus on the Western Balkans. So what is going on in the region actually, and what are some trends, opportunities, and challenges to implement AI in the public sector, more specifically in the digital public services as well. So just a very brief overview about myself. So I'm also from the region, but I'm currently based in Estonia, where I'm doing my PhD. And actually, recently I'm working on an article in the topics, but I'm focusing more on the citizen side, actually, on the adoption of these technologies by citizens, more specifically AI technologies. And in the past, I have been working in national and international organizations in the topic. And on the right-hand side, you can see some policy work or reports that I have been involved in. And actually, two of them are about the Western Balkans, but we will dig deeper more into them and the cases that we identify there. But if you have an interest to get to know more about the topic, feel free to visit them. So basically, to just provide some context and also to kind of start talking more about the topic. So we use technology on a daily basis. So we use laptops actually to do our work, and I'm using a PowerPoint to illustrate my ideas for this discussion. But what is going on, or a recent trend with AI, is that our relationship to technology is slowly changing. So instead of only relying on technology to do something based on our command, we are also starting to rely on them a bit more, and also relying on or trusting technology on how to do things and when to do things. So what do I mean by this? I mean, one way to illustrate is by using the example of two cars. So one of them, let's say, classic traditional car, and the other one a self-driving car. So with the car on the left, actually, we usually use these cars to go from point A to B, but then it's still us who is in command to accelerate, use the brakes, or to decide to make all the decisions. So everything happens under our command, but we trust or we rely on these technologies based on how well they function. But with self-driving cars, the relationship changes a bit. So we no longer focus on only what to do, but also on how to do and when to do things. For example, we trust the car to turn left, turn right, or accelerate, or when to use the brakes and when to stop. And this changing of relationship is actually, it's made possible because of these new emerging developments that are happening in the field. And this also has some implications about government as well. So in the previous presentations, there was quite some talk actually about the opportunities of AI in government and also the challenges that it's creating. I will just briefly touch upon some of these points. So basically for governments, AI is creating new opportunities to improve citizen engagement. For example, we saw the use of chatbots, how they are used to generate, let's say, citizen data about the services, and then, for example, collect feedback also from citizens and then use it to make services more citizen-centric, or also to make digital public services more personalized, or to use data from the past to kind of predict some citizen behavior and then provide personalized services, and then also collect and use larger amounts of data to inform decision-making, as well as, for example, to detect fraud and also prevent it. And for this, actually, we have some examples in the Western Balkans, so we will come back to the topic. And then also, however, the implementation of AI in government, we saw it in the previous presentations, is not as smooth as we would expect or as smooth as we would want. So there are a lot of challenges that come with implementation of these technologies. And some of these challenges are similar to what we saw before with e-government projects, where also the rate of, let's say, project failure was quite high at the beginning and then it slowly improved. So some of the challenges that, let's say, are more tailored to AI are, I would say, are related to lack of quality data or good quality data to develop these technologies. But then also it's related to lack of skills in the public sector, both to develop, deploy, but also then to institutionalize these technologies and make them part of the daily practices. And then there's this high risk actually is triggering this risk aversion culture in government, as well as it's also having some implications in terms of what we consider as or debate around ethical concerns. And actually some, let's say, some of the bias that are introduced in decision making, they actually pose quite a threat to what we call good governance or the values in public administration, and also to in general to the democratic values. So this is just to provide some context. As I promised, I will focus more in the Western Balkans. However, AI is not something that comes out of blue. So basically, it's a continuation of previous e-government efforts. And what we have in this graph, so I try to through this graph actually, it shows sort of the development of or the uptake of e-government in the Western Balkans. So it is based on a very simple indicator, focusing on how many or what's the percentage of the total citizens that have used digital public services at least once in the Western Balkans, and also the percentage of people that are registered in these national e-government portals. And from this table, actually, what we can get are two important lessons. First of all, the region is still at the beginning, I would say, at the beginning when it comes to digital transformation or implementation of digital transformation agenda. And there's still a lot of work to do. However, if we look at the table, it only has data for 2 years. However, we can see that there's a lot of progress. So all the investments that have been done in the past, all the efforts that have been put in the field are actually we are starting to yield some outcomes. So the uptake from citizens is slowly starting to increase. And I also mentioned e-government before. So also when we started talking about e-government 2 or 3 decades ago, so there was this trend to also develop e-government strategies. So some countries were quite faster or quicker with that, and then some countries are still following, let's say, what happened in the past, and then are trying to update the digital agenda. And then in terms of national AI strategies in the Western Balkans, we see that some countries have done quite some progress so far, but also some countries have to catch up. And I have provided 2 tables with a list of countries where I kind of illustrate in very broad what has happened so far. So Albania so far doesn't have a national AI strategy or a published plan in the field. At least this is for the time being. So in 2022, in Albania they published the digital agenda and action plan. So it's a digital agenda that stretches from 2022 to 2026 and has some action plans. But in the action plans, it's not creating a national AI strategy is not there yet. Bosnia and Herzegovina and Kosovo also don't have a national AI strategy, but also they haven't published that they are working on it or they have some plans to do so. And then we have Montenegro. Montenegro is also in the same situation with the previous two. So also Montenegro doesn't have a national AI strategy, but Montenegro follows EU Digital Compass principles to adopt a regulatory framework when it comes to emerging technologies. However, this is also not what we are talking here. So this is also not a national AI strategy. The only two countries that have made more progress in the field are North Macedonia and Serbia. So in North Macedonia in 2021, they established a working group to set up a national AI strategy. However, the strategy has not been published yet. And I also recently read a report by a local NGO who was involved actually as part of this working group, and they stated that the strategy is not ready to be published yet. So this is a development that we actually have to follow. And so far, the only country that has established has set up a strategy on national strategy on AI is Serbia. So this is done as part of strategy of development of AI in the Republic of Serbia, and it stretches from 2020 to 2025. So, and actually in this strategy, there are special emphases that are put on using AI in digital public services, and also highlighted some let's say ethical standards that to ensure the trustworthy development and use of AI in government. So what we see so far is that some countries are actually moving faster than the others, and some others they still have to catch up. However, this is quite, I would say, this is quite in contrast with what is going on in the practice, because in the practice, based on the research that I have done in the past, we have identified quite some cases. So there are some AI is being used in government. However, there is it is still let's say it is still not so the efforts are still not so cohesive. So it's usually quite fragmented and taking place at the agency level or at the ministry level, but there's no established overarching plan. So some of this, some of my research actually has been done as part of these reports. So this is actually these are three reports. It's the same type of report, but three different ones, three different versions, and you can identify cases in different countries here. But also these reports actually include countries from Visegrad countries, cases from Visegrad countries, and also Georgia in the first edition. And so the research that we have done here to share a bit my experience was quite explorative, I would say, because our objective at the beginning was to kind of create a landscape of what is going on in the region. And most of the time we faced a lot of challenges with collecting the data, because just by doing desk research is not always possible to identify these tools and get to know more about them. So most of the information is actually not available online. So what we had to do is actually conduct interviews. And I worked in the second edition actually. And my experience with the second edition is that I had to conduct 5 or 6 interviews to just start identifying cases. So use this snowballing approach, go from one department or one agency to another, and then talk to different people to kind of create a picture first for ourselves, what is going on, and then to start identifying cases and then start digging deeper on them. And so the cases that we identified, I would say, are pretty diverse in the sense of institutions, but at the same time, there are some patterns that we saw. So first of all, one of the most common, let's say, algorithm used in public sector, and one with most information available online, I would say, or the most transparent one, is the use of some type of specific algorithms to allocate cases in court, to allocate cases to court cases to judges, actually, in the justice system. So it was more easy to find information about these systems because usually there are a lot of reports that are kind of targeted to increase the transparency of justice system in the region. And actually these technologies are at some point described, but also then they illustrate how they function and what are, let's say, what is the impact that they have in the justice system. So this type of algorithm is part of different types of systems. So for example, in Albania, it's part of CCMIS system. In Kosovo, it's part of SMIL. So some of these systems are human resources management system. Some of them are case management system. But the goal is basically to allocate cases to judges. So based on the department where the judges are working and the relevance of the case, and also is to share equal burden on judges, or for example, to allocate cases based on equal probability. And the goal is quite similar. So it is to increase operational efficiency, but most importantly, to minimize human interference and also ensure system fairness. So to ensure that all cases are randomly allocated, and also, let's say, people who are involved in those cases have a fair allocation of cases. What is quite interesting is also the pattern of donors. So we find that in actually all the countries, these projects were externally funded. And also we have the same case with similar principles, but in a different system implemented in Serbia as well. And also we have the same pattern with external donor. So what we kind of concluded, or some hypotheses that we kind of build, or propositions based on this, is that these algorithms were implemented as part of justice reforms in order to minimize human interference when it comes to allocation of cases. So to increase the effectiveness of the justice system. The same system was also implemented, or at least was implemented, in North Macedonia. But actually, this one is a very interesting case. If you want to find more information, there's more information about the case in the report. But soon enough, the algorithm was involved in a public controversy, because in 2016, the Ministry of Justice in North Macedonia initiated an investigation, and it turned out that some of the civil servants or the public officials were not following the guidelines of the system, and the conclusion were that there was human interference in the process of allocating the cases. Actually, one quite high-level official ended up in prison because of this, and then the algorithm was suspended. So, but based on our study, or on the research that we did, there were no clear indications, or there were no indications that there was a technological failure at some point. So the technology was actually functioning quite well, but it was rather a governance failure, or the issue of interference. And then we also identified some other cases, so in other domains. So we also identified cases in tax administration in Kosovo, where they conduct risk analysis and identify cases for inspection, especially for fraud detection. And actually, up to at that time, the research was conducted in 2021. So over 70% of the cases are actually identified in this way. And then they use another additional algorithm to allocate cases to inspectors. And actually, it was quite interesting, because the algorithm was developed in-house, sorry. And at the beginning, they had, if I remember correctly, around 15 parameters that they used to detect fraud, but then they continuously improved. So in 2021, they had over 150, and I'm sure the number increased today. And then we also have another automated decision-making tool used in e-procurement bureau in North Macedonia. So basically, this does automated bid ranking and sends automated notifications to stakeholders involved in the process. So it's quite a sensitive field, so the accuracy of the system is controlled internally, and then parties also can make complaints about or point out to potential mistakes. And then another case is also in public health in Serbia. This is also quite an interesting case, because an AI tool was developed to automate the reading of chest X-rays. So there are several hospitals that are connected to this central tool, and they take chest rays in different hospitals, send them to this central system, and then the system is providing the initial diagnosis. And then the diagnosis is sent back to doctors. So the whole process lasts up to 1 minute. So it's quite a quick tool. And then the doctors review the outcome of the system. So the system is not being used to provide final suggestion or prescription, but it's just using to kind of support or argument the decision making. And then at some point, there was an audit, control, or accuracy check of some parts of the system, and it turned out that the accuracy is 71%, but the goal is to increase it. So here in those three cases that I have put in this slide, we see that the goal of the project is quite different from each other. So we see that the value that these systems are trying to generate is more related, let's say, process effectiveness in tax administration in Kosovo, and then in e-procurement is also reduction of human interference, but also improving efficiency of the process. And then also in public health in Serbia, it's more about burden reduction for doctors. So So then we talked quite a lot also about chatbot before, but also in the region, in the Western Balkan region, we see that this is a growing trend. So the number of chatbots is also increasing. So I have included only a few cases, but I'm sure there's more. I mean, I know of some other cases, some simple chatbots in web pages that are integrated there, so you can just go and ask very simple questions. So one very interesting project is in Albania. So this is a voice-based assistant for digital public services. And the goal is to make it available for phone. And the idea is to interact through voice with this chatbot, and the chatbot will provide support for digital public services. So this project was announced in 2022 by Albanian Prime Minister, and it will be, let's say, active at the national level. And the goal is to introduce it in 2023. So far, I don't have information if it has been introduced yet or at what stage of development it is, but I expect that it's going to be introduced soon, so that we can follow up a bit more. And then there's another chatbot that is developed in both Bosnia and Herzegovina and Serbia. So this chatbot is developed in 4 municipalities, so in 2 municipalities in each country, and it basically provides basic information on administrative procedures, working hours, and contact details in 4 municipalities. And the chatbot is available and can be accessed through both Viber and the city portal. Another case is ADA in North Macedonia. So this case provides information about foreign and domestic investment assistance. So it operates based on information that is already available to the public. So it's not that you can have a conversation, but it provides, let's say, a central point about providing information about both foreign and domestic investment assistance. And it doesn't have any human interaction or human contact throughout the interaction. And currently, as I mentioned, it provides answers to questions about the topic, but the goal is to turn it into a single point of access to government information. And actually, a few days ago, I went to the website and just had a quick test of it, and it works quite well, and it also has quite a pleasant, I would say, interface. And then the next case is Inspector Virtual Assistant in Serbia. So it provides support to fill out online complaint reporting form on the portal of the Coordinated Commission for Inspection Oversight. So it's a chatbot that was used quite a lot from the first year. So there were on the first year there were over 16,000 complaints that were filed with its support, and then 10,000 went to the relevant institutions. Also, there are different stages of development. So initially, the whole idea was to provide support to users to fill out the form, but the idea is to also evolve towards providing information on legislation and inspection practices. So what we see in my presentation with the developments in the field and with all these cases is that there's a positive trend for AI development in the Western Balkans. And these are not the only cases. I mean, there are many countries, many agencies that are using these technologies. However, what's really challenging at this point is the service provider's transparency. So most of the time, the information is not available online. And it's very difficult to get to know more about how this technology function or what is their goal, because you have to actually go, I mean, as a researcher, I would say go in the field to collect your information, but there's not a lot of information online. Also, we didn't see many AI registers, for example, both at national and regional level. So for those who are interested or who work in the field, but also who are already working, most of the time they are not available. For example, what some other institutions have or what technologies are available or being in use by other agencies. And also there's not so much about work being done in promoting the existing cases. So as I mentioned, there are some really interesting cases. There are quite some good examples of how these technologies were developed, or what practices that they were used, but also there's not a lot of sharing of these experiences, both at the national level, I mean, between the agencies, but also on the cross-border level in the whole region. There were some patterns actually that we identified of experts going from one country to another to support, let's say, the development and the implementation of some of these technologies. But usually these are supported by some certain donors that, let's say, that provided some donation to develop a certain technology in a country, and then they kind of support this sharing of experiences in another country. But there are not so many of these bottom-up initiatives, I would say. And another issue is what is missing is actually good data, which is crucial to develop these more advanced technologies. So many of the services in the region, many of the services are delivered offline. Even if they are available online, or if they exist in some platforms, their adoption is not so high. So, and also not the data that is generated by these services is not always machine readable that could be used to develop these tools or to provide these services. Another issue is that data in public sector in the Western Balkans in general remains quite fragmented. There are practices of data exchange within the institutions, and also there's work being done in terms of interoperability. However, this is work in progress. So most of the time it's a big challenge that is faced by these institutions. And also another issue is regarding the willingness by both citizens, on one hand, to develop these technologies, but on the other hand is to adopt them. And also another challenge that we identify, or that is quite present in the region, is that there are no systematic frameworks to procure, monitor, and evaluate AI in government. So usually based on my discussions with civil servants, they mentioned that they have their own standard of operating procedures in the agency where they operate or in the agency where they work. But then these SOPs are quite different from one agency to another. So there are not so many of these systematic frameworks that guide the work of public sector in more than one agency or more than one department sometimes. And then there are also some challenges with legal frameworks to develop and implement trustworthy AI. So first of all is the issue of transparency and accountability. So how do we enforce or ensure those? And previous research actually shows that AI technology or AI-powered services that are transparent and, let's say, have established some accountability guidelines are more, let's say, are services that are more favorable to be used by citizens. And then on the second hand, we have also how to minimize privacy concerns and ensure data protection. So there's a lot of hype, but at the same time, there's a lot of, let's say, negative discussions around AI in general, and this is also reflected in the use of AI in government. And also the third one is how to promote stakeholder engagement. So in the region, governments are using AI, but then private sector is moving much faster. So there are a lot of companies who are actually developing these technologies, and they could provide a lot of value in terms of building this ecosystem of AI in the public sector. So how do we promote these engagements? Then the next challenge is national and regional collaboration. So far, I pointed out that there are some very limited initiatives for national and regional collaboration, but it's still not there. And this is definitely a big challenge that we could actually do something for it in the future in order to improve the status. And also information is available in the local languages mainly. So it's very challenging. For example, here today, community, but if those people decide to follow up about some of these solutions that I presented here, for those who don't speak the local languages, most of the time it's quite challenging. And then also we have a growing, there are indications that the privacy concerns are growing in the region, especially in the light of recent cyber attacks and data leaks that are taking place. And actually privacy concerns are usually a big challenge to the success of e-governance, and they can lead to failure of various digital public services. So today we actually talk quite a lot about the developments that are taking place. So this is my last slide to just wrap it up what we are missing. So we talked a lot about development, implementation, impact, opportunities, challenges, but what we are missing in general in this discussion is a citizen perspective, because some of these technologies, as Colin mentioned, are developed for public administration, for, let's say, for back office operation. But some of these are actually developed for citizens, and citizens are those who have to interact. So far, we still don't know a lot about how citizen perception towards these technologies. The first one might sound like quite a research question, a question for researchers, but it's not, because if we know more about how citizen perceptions towards these technologies, actually this can help a lot into designing these technologies and also addressing the different concerns that citizens might have about the privacy or about trust in general. And then also we don't know a lot about how much citizens in the Western Balkans trust governments who are using these technologies, and also especially to disclose personal information to these technologies with sometimes which are introducing some bias in decision making. And actually, we don't know a lot how this trust is affecting the willingness to use these technologies. And also next, we don't know a lot about trust in technology in general. I mean, how do citizens see these technologies and how much are they willing to trust them? And also the citizen concerns over privacy and security issues. So this is also, I mean, as a community who is involved or interested in the field, both conducting research, developing and implementing these technologies, I think it would provide quite some value in the future to also have a more informed understanding of the citizen perspective as well. So this was a very brief, or I would say a brief overview or a brief landscape view of what is going on in the region. So what are some of the developments, trends, and challenges that we are facing? So I would give the floor back to Nick and then also see if there are some questions.
Thank you so much, Art. Well, it was brief indeed, but I think very concise and very precise. And really, as you said, giving like the landscape in current practice. Interesting to see that, well, practice is there, as you truly said, maybe not to the extent that we wish or hope for, but at least, I mean, practice is there. But also that you, I think, quite nicely laid out the challenges, current and future challenges. So this is, I think, really great to see. So grateful for this, Art. We have some small time left, but still we have some time left. So I would first maybe ask some specific or detailed follow-up questions to Art, if colleagues in the audience, I mean, from the region, but I notice we also have colleagues from outside the Western Balkan region. So colleagues, if you have specific questions, follow-up questions to Art, please, this might be a good moment first to direct them to Art. Looking through the audience, if we see some hands up. See hand, yes, Goran, please shoot.
Hi, Arti, thanks again for these insights into Western Balkans. I was wondering what was the cause of such a great success in Albania for uptake of these services? You did mention that in last year, I guess about 90%. There was uptake, and could you imagine that what we learned from both Colin and Sim, that some of the elements that they identified as success factor could be a shortcut for the Western Balkans, especially as Florian underlined the fact that there are so many similarities between digital transformation and AI adoption. So I guess there is a good basis to learn upon and perhaps to use the existing infrastructure in the Western Balkans to speed up in the AI. So I would appreciate your opinion on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. And actually that's a good question, because I have my opinion on that is that Albania is a good example in the region when it comes to digital public services, because they have done quite a significant progress in the recent years. And actually what Albania, in my opinion, has shown is that to be, let's say, to be late with digital transformation is not such a big issue, because it's a big issue because you want, of course, to be successful from the beginning, but also now in the region, if we were lacking in the past years, now we have the opportunity to learn from the best practices that happened in the other countries and adopt them. So in Albania, I think it was the right timing, in my opinion, because a lot of developments happened during COVID time. So when they had lockdowns, they introduced a high number of services that were previously offline. They introduced them online and then sort of build momentum around COVID, and then they continued it. So they continued with introducing new cases, but also then adopting quite some smart policies, making some of the, let's say, the use of some digital services, making it making it mandatory, so offering them online. And actually this increased the percentage of people that are register or at least use digital public services at least one. So, and the second point is that most of the time I think that public administrations in the region are more similar to each other than they are, for example, to some Nordic countries or some Western European countries. So that's why I think that it's really good opportunities to have these regional collaborations, both supported by international organizations, but also to have them initiated bottom up, I would say, let's say from the national or municipal or let's say government level, that we collaborate with each other and share these lessons. Because what happened in Albania, it can easily happen in another country. And actually we see, if we look at the numbers at the table, you see that there was a lot of progress in only 1 year. And so, for example, if it took 10 years for another country, let's say from 2000 to 2010 to have 50% of the people registered in the national e-government platform, I mean, in the Western Balkan, you can see that that can happen in 2 years or 3 years, because the countries are smaller and also the structure of the public administration, usually it's a bit more centralized. So we don't have a lot of these regions where you don't have, where the legislation, let's say, is not aligned, or e-government solutions are not aligned. So this would be my take if I address your question.
Very good. Very good. Other questions, colleagues?
I think there is in the chat.
Thanks for attracting my attention, Goran. I would say, Ulvi, if you want to come in, I mean, opening the mic, please do. I think that's a bit more interactive if you feel like. So, Ulvi, if you would like to.
Yes, sure. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay, thank you, Art, for the informative presentation. It was great. My question is that how actually can potential ethical concerns can be effectively addressed related integrating the artificial intelligence into government decision-making processes? How can governments manage these processes?
Well, how I would say is, I think recently there was a lot of work done to kind of build principles. So we have so many guidelines now, so many different types of guidelines that have been developed. And also there has been a lot of work done on having or ensuring this value-based digital transformation. So I think this is a good reference point to start integrating these values from the very beginning and throughout the process. But also, for example, these technologies are not introduced or implemented out of blue. So there's a whole process that goes before implementation, that is, let's say, building the idea, building the necessary, let's say, conditions, or ensuring the access to the data, developing these technologies. So I think all these stages during the development of the technologies are stages where we can start developing and integrating these principles. And then also after it's implemented and the uptake by the citizens starts, to continue with control monitoring. And also for example, with the use of algorithms, especially in the Western Balkans, each of the institution is actually conducting from time to time, conducting some auditing of these technologies to ensure that the accuracy of the decision is according to the plan, or according to what the technology is expecting. So both controlling the technology, but also ensuring a value-based development of these technologies and implementation.
Thank you very much for your answer.
I hope I touched the point.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Good, great. Other questions in the chat or live on screen? If not, because we are running towards the very end. If no further general or particular questions, maybe Jose, if you would like to say some words concluding or wrapping up some of the things would be great.
Oh, thank you, Nick, for the opportunity. I think we have had the opportunity to listen to really great contributions. If I would have to wrap up some messages of what we have addressed today, I think all speakers agree that we are definitely in a disruptive moment. Before, technology was good for calculation. We used to send people to the moon with humans doing calculation. That of course computers made all these humans redundant, and calculation was definitely outsourced to machines. But now machines can not only do exactly what we ask for them to do, but they can also come with rules, as it was said by Colin and also by Art. Now they can also take decisions, can make decisions, machines. So this is definitely disruptive. But for this to be implemented in the public sector, we still need lots of natural intelligence. We still need lots of governance. We still need to look at processes, look at ethical consideration, legal aspects. And we need to do that because public administration has definitely to fulfill all the roles that Colin has mentioned and Sim also has mentioned in artificial intelligence. So I think this is very good opportunity we have now. I would also say that I would, colleagues, please advise you to look at OECD website. Of course, we have the OECD recommendation on artificial intelligence that you may know, but also OECD now has an observatory on innovation of artificial intelligence. And also, I will advise you to look at all the great work done by the European Commission on Artificial Intelligence that has been presented, and colleagues like Art and Colin has been contributing, because now knowledge is growing and we have to we need human knowledge to be able to make a success story of artificial intelligence. That will be my wrap up. So thank you, Nick. And we have a more question in the chat, I think, or comment.
Thanks, thanks, Jose, for bringing in these some of these closing words already. I think Colin posted an interesting post on the chat to take into account and understanding the ethical concerns when not using AI, when facing limited resources, raising complexity. So it's I think this discussion on ethical concerns, it's super important, and this is something that I think we also wanted to stress in this setting, in this context, but also phrasing that this discussion has multiple angles, and that from the same side, I mean the same coin, there are different sides in discussing the ethical concerns, taking into account all the perspectives. The one using AI and controlling AI, but also the one, well, when not using, when there is the opportunity and when the options are there, that we also might lose some of the possibilities that AI is offering to us. I'm just carefully looking to my screen with one eye, but with the other eye carefully looking into the clock as well. But it has been a long morning since we started, and I'm really grateful for all the colleagues that stayed online with us. So looking on the screen, I don't see any virtual hands being raised. So I would just ask if someone has a final comment, question to raise, or comment to make, please do so. This might be a perfect moment to do. If not, then with this, I would love to warmly thank, besides of Jose and myself, the side of Sigma, warmly thank all the speakers. First, starting from Minister Jovanovic early this morning, over Colin, Sim, and Art for their great presentations and super useful insights. Also thanking Florian and DG NEAR to a wider extent for the great support towards all your countries, but also towards us as a Sigma program. And then thanks to you colleagues again for staying online with us. We, as usually, we will share the materials, so presentations plus the full recording to all being registered for this event. There was quite a big number of registrations, over 150. So people will receive the full recording, will receive the materials. So but we will send you the materials and the recording in a matter of days. Just give us a bit of time to process all of this. Then secondly, we will, as I introduced this morning, we will continue with this series. We have scheduled for the next topic to be focused on multi-channel, omni-channel approaches of service delivery. So we are working still on the agenda and fixing the exact timing and date. It will not be before summer, so it will most likely be somewhere mid of September, but we will keep you informed. And that's the last thing. If always, I mean, if there is from your side anything you would like to raise, any topic you would like to see being discussed, presented, always feel free to reach out to us. I think we're very keen on tailoring our offer, if we may call, tailoring our offer to the needs that are there. So if ever you have some interest to tackle a particular topic or to present on a particular topic, feel free to reach out to us, and then we're happy to get in dialogue with you to see how we can transform this into a session like this, or even shorter. It shouldn't be 3 hours. So with this, many thanks to all the colleagues. Hope to see you soon, also in real life, in all the areas and countries where we are active. And then stay healthy, stay safe, and wishing you an excellent continuation of the day and the week later on. So thanks so much. We'll be in touch. Bye-bye for now. Bye-bye. Ciao, ciao.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.